Okay, welcome to the live stream for April 11th, 2018. I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So welcome. Let me hop over to the chat. We have Arlene and Lynn. So far, Jessica. Hey, welcome. So as you guys are coming on, I wanted to mention I guess first things first, have you guys been following the whole Facebook Mark Zuckerberg questioning, I guess you'd call it, online? I tuned into it yesterday on YouTube. They had the live streaming, and oh my gosh, I have to say, I feel really bad for the guy because it's like hours worth of him answering pretty much the same question, just worded in different ways to people that you can tell don't understand what he's saying. It's it's so cringy. Oh man. And it's like trying to explain the internet to your grandparents. Like the senators and stuff are just like not getting it. There's maybe one or two that get it, but by and large, they don't get it. And that's got to be awful to be Mark Zuckerberg and sit there and be like, oh man, I've got to totally defend my company and everything. And people don't even understand what I'm saying. Crazy. So, with that said, the whole privacy thing with Facebook, it's a good time, if you haven't already, to make sure that you do understand your privacy settings over on Facebook. So, take a moment, go explore your settings in your profile tab and make sure. This is such a common thing, time and time again. So, make sure if you don't want people to know what groups you're in, that you've hidden your groups, that your friends list isn't open to anybody, that it's only open to maybe other friends, or maybe it's totally private. Just know what information is out there on you, especially on Facebook, because things are so interconnected and people are always shocked. They're like, how did my aunt know I was in this group? Or how did my ex-husband's best friend know I was in here? And then it's super embarrassing and awkward and potentially dangerous and all of that. So check your privacy settings. Okay. Let's see. Let me scroll up. James is here. Welcome. Okay. Gamer Christina says, my sister doesn't believe the abuse my kid's dad put me through, so I stopped contact with her. Do you think that was wrong of me to cut her out of my life? It's upsetting when I hear that didn't happen. Decisions like that, it's up to you. And I totally get how it gets to that point where you're like, this is my reality. I've had to fight really hard to even understand what was going on, and I need people that support it. So there's always, I think, this huge amount of collateral damage after a person gets out of an abusive relationship. It's friends, it's family, it's neighbors, it's other people in their church, people in their family that just don't understand what happened. And it's infuriating on its own level, because it's oftentimes when a person's in an abusive relationship of any kind, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, psychological, physical, sexual, you name it, the outside world, when they're in it, well, I would say like 95% of the people tend to justify the abuser's actions, and they minimize what the target is going through. They just don't understand it. So it's really difficult for a target to get that validation and that clarity when they're in it. And then finally, what tends to happen is then the target finally gets to a point where they end up leaving. They just can't handle it anymore, or the abuser leaves. Kind of one or two things tend to happen. And at that point, then they start realizing that they've been abused. And then other people, the 95% that were justifying what they were going through, then basically is like, yeah, abusive relationships, you should have left a long time ago. Or it's like you can't win. Like, people just don't hear you no matter what you're saying. And it's really difficult. So yeah, I get where you're coming from. I think a lot of people struggle with that. So, and then something else I wanted to share with you guys really quick, because I always forget, is next week, technically April 19th. So like Thursday of next week is going to be my 3-year anniversary on YouTube, if you can believe it. So I am going to make a video. I didn't make one last year to celebrate my 2-year anniversary because I was getting such bad anxiety about being on camera. I couldn't even force myself to do a video. So hopefully this year I'm good and I can actually record a video. It's so much easier to do a live stream because it's like throwing yourself off the high dive. Like once you click go live, like blah, like you're there, versus doing a recorded video and then you have to go back and watch it and you think of all the things you didn't say and everything, it's just difficult. It's difficult to see yourself on camera and all of it. So anyways, but 3-year anniversary, that's exciting. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Dawn says, yep, she's just saying, yeah, I had to cut my sister out of my life for that exact reason as well. It's heartbreaking. And Freedom Lee says, good evening, Dana. I just got on. I'm making dinner and cleaning while listening to you. I'm so glad you're here. Well, thank you. Dinner and cleaning. These live streams, podcasts, I think long videos like this are fantastic to clean to. So I tend to do the same with other people's live streams. Okay, scroll up. Danielle says this is her first time watching live. I've watched a bunch of Dana's videos and they have been so helpful to me. That's awesome. Well, welcome. I will say live streams can be, people tend to either really like them or they don't at all. And for different reasons. The chat, participating in the chat is always entertaining. It's kind of like its own show in and of itself. It's just, especially here, I think people tend, it's the same people by and large that tend to come here every week. So people tend to know each other and catch up and chat and all kinds of stuff. So that's kind of fun, just chatting with people from all over the world. And then it's also, I don't know, I like live streams for that reason. It's just something totally different. So welcome. Okay. Awesome. James says, I am so proud and happy that I listened to my intuition and identified some toxic behavior. That's huge. Yeah, that is huge. With somebody that he's been seeing. Yeah, very good. And then now the next step after you identify it is going to be, okay, then what are you going to do with that information now? And this is where it comes into, does it fall into deal breaker territory for you or is it workable territory for you? And if it's workable, then coming up with a way of how can you like address this assertively with the person and kind of go from there. But, if it's deal breaker stuff, then it's deal breaker stuff, and that's fine too. It's all up to you. Dora says, my ex is blocked, but he seems to know about me. What a punk. Yeah. And back to the whole privacy thing again, too. If I highly recommend people change all of your passwords online at a minimum and, make sure, and then in real life too, changing the locks on your house, these kinds of things. If you're on Facebook, really locking down your privacy settings there. It's amazing what other people can see about us on Facebook that we might not realize. So for example, I thought I had a lot of stuff hidden on Facebook the other day, and it turns out I didn't. So that was kind of embarrassing. So just double check all that stuff. So let me scroll down. Cynthia says, watching and listening to you relaxes me in my trauma about relationships. Well, thank you. I'm glad. I think it helps to just know that you're not alone. And especially, I think being in a chat with, 100 plus other people that have all been through the same thing, it can just be so validating. And it's just kind of a nice place, nice time for people to catch up. And I think feel understood is a huge, huge thing. Okay, let's see. Oh, interesting. Kit says, yeah, I was listening back to last week and I felt very supported, even though there was no chat and not live. Well, good. I'm glad that that was able to make you feel supported, even though you weren't in the chat and it wasn't live. Wildflower says that she has a YouTube channel. I don't know if you want me to say it on here or not, but it's and says it's a process getting used to talking into a webcam. Yeah, it really is. And it's this constant evolution of stuff, and I was so nervous when I started my YouTube channel. And my brother had said, he's like, Dana, just make a bunch of videos and don't air them. Like, just get used to talking, basically talking to yourself. Like, just get used to talking to a camera. And I did. So I made a bunch of videos on my iPhone, like my iPhone 4, I think it was. But then I decided, oh, I can't watch these. Like, this is so cringy. So I just posted them. And I'm so glad that I just forced myself into doing that instead of getting caught up in the perfection of it all. And if you've been here any length of time or watched my old videos, then it's been quite the progression. Sound has been an ongoing issue, understanding technology, like, this stuff was all very new for me, and I'm still learning and growing. And I was actually going to put on a pop filter tonight, and I don't know what I did with it. That'll be next week. So trying to make small improvements as you move forward. That's pretty much with everything in life, right? Okay, let's see. Postmodern says, well, I have been up since 4:30 this morning, so this is the last thing I am doing before getting ready for bed. Well, good deal, and welcome. Welcome. Diane says, yes, I look forward to everyone. I'm still so isolated. And McBackhand says, I've never felt betrayed on this level in my life. It's really shattering. Yeah. Yes, it is. And I think, oh man, there's so much to all of these different types of relationships that can be such a struggle. I think that degree of feeling emotionally shattered is one of the first things that people realize, like what they encountered was not within the realm of like a normal bad breakup. Like, it was just so extreme. And it oftentimes is, we see that lack of empathy, that lack of remorse, that just that level of callousness and cruelty. And uh, it's just, oh man, it just hurts your heart. I mean, it's just so hard to understand how another person can just not care like that. It's awful. So I'm glad that you're here. Please know that the pain that you are experiencing right now, it's not always this intense, and that it doesn't last forever. So just please know that, because I know especially when a person is a few months out, they really just tend to feel so emotionally devastated that it doesn't feel like there's ever any kind of getting out of this. So you can create a new normal for yourself. You can work towards rebuilding your life, and you can make your life even better than it was before. So please know that, that many of your best days are still ahead of you. But the way that you're feeling right now is very normal. Okay, let me scroll up here. Yeah, James says, I tried to record a video and man, it's harder to do than I thought. One day I'll start uploading. Yeah, it's a challenge, especially if you want to do like a lot of editing and, um, you know, sound effects, and just there's a lot to learn. I would encourage you just to start. Sometimes there's that saying that perfect is the enemy of good, or perfect is the enemy of done. And there's so much truth in that. And just realizing like you're just going to ride a learning curve. I came across some videos the other day of was PewDiePie and then another gamer YouTuber called Jacksepticeye. And I don't really watch either one of them that much, but like I really like Jacksepticeye when he does more serious videos. He's just he seems like a really cool guy. Anyways, he was showing some of his earlier clips and kind of his evolution through YouTube. And then PewDiePie every now and again will show his evolution. And it's just really cool to see, yeah, you know what? Nobody starts at the finish line. Like you just start where you start. And it's just going to be a series of trial and error. And I think one of the hardest things with video is that it's out there on the internet versus like a blog that you can edit, so it doesn't feel so permanent, but a video is just out there. But I think if you can have that attitude of like, yeah, you know what, I'm going to start and it's going to be rough, but I'm just going to keep working at it, and you just keep going. So let's see. Let me scroll up. Oh, let me scroll down. Going the wrong way. Can you guys see this video? When I go to my YouTube channel, it says this video is unavailable. That's weird. Speaking of learning curve, I don't think I've ever had that before. I can see the chat. Diane says yes. Yes, you can see the video. Missouri Cowboy says he can see me. Oh, yes, you said yes, it was unavailable for a few minutes, but now you're here. Okay. There's like a delay, but there shouldn't be that much of a delay. That's weird. Okay. James says, I'm only 11 days out and I feel completely broken. The push-pull is still in effect. And sadly, she is using our kids to hurt me. Will she always do this? It's hard to say what a person will always do. I guess if she's doing it now, I would just anticipate that it's going to continue. And those things that's just really tough. It's hard, I think kind of getting a paper trail of everything and keeping your kids' best interest at the forefront of your mind and trying to just make your conversations only about your kids and just trying to minimize contact as much as possible. It's hard. There's a good book if you're interested in learning more about this. It's called Divorce Poison by, what is his name? I want to say Robert something or other, Robert Warshak, maybe. Divorce Poison is the title, and it's fantastic. And it's all about dealing with any type of separation with a manipulative person and some different strategies that you can employ to kind of make things as smooth as possible. So it's a good book. Jennifer says, I try to journal, but I get paranoid that somebody's going to find it, so I'm not fully honest. Then I thought I could do an online journal, but then I got paranoid that it would be hacked. I struggle with that too. I was just thinking about that the other day because I've been working on a journal that's, I don't know where it is. Working on a journal to publish. And hold on, I got to stand up. I have a standing desk. I don't know if I told you guys that last week. I got to keep switching positions here. So anyways, yeah, I was thinking about that with a journal of it might, like I struggle with doing a paper journal for that exact same reason, but the online journal freaks me out. So, you can do like a password protect for Word and for probably different like types of programs like that, where you have to enter in a password before anybody else can see it. So if it is, hacked, it might have some sort of like added layer of protection. Um, if you're talking about certain people too, like you might want to just use different names for them if that's a concern. Something else I do that I like is I will record if I have like a lot of anxiety and stress about a situation, I'll record myself just talking out loud about it, and then I'll delete it like either that day or shortly after. It just feels good to just get it out of your system, Okay, let me scroll down here. Don says, "You must have a gift, Dana. My cat's chillaxing while listening. Thanks." Oh, that's awesome. The cats over here were so cute the other day. Travis's cats, they were fighting. They're brothers, and they look alike, except one is a little chunk-a-lump, and then the other one is like a parkour crazed maniac and just bounces all over the house. But it was so cute. They were fighting, and then they both fell asleep like mid cat fight. And I had to take a picture of them because it was so cute. The one cat had his all four paws on the other one, and then they were both just like passed out on the floor. Stinking cute. Karen asks, when is your 5-year journal coming out? I'm excited. So I'm thinking, actually, you know what? I just remembered where it was. Hold on. I'm going to go grab it real quick. Back. So the learning curve to all of this. So I apparently cannot use a tape measure properly. I thought I had measured it, and it's big. So this is the 5-year journal, and it's massive. It's like a textbook sized book. So when I got the author proof, when you self-publish a book, you can request an author copy before it goes live. So you can just make sure that the cover, everything's formatted properly, and you just go through it one more time. And so I got it, and it was just massive. And I thought, okay, this is not going to work. So I ended up redoing it and made into a 3-year journal. So it's smaller. And then I made the size 5x8. So this size is 7x10, giant textbook size. But then the 5x8 will hopefully be out in like the next probably week or two. I don't know. I just got the final copy back from the formatter gal today for the 5x8 size. And we had to reformat everything. So we're making it 3 years instead of 5. Yeah. So I love this journal, and I would like to see, I'd like to see if I can make it into some sort of like downloadable, editable document. So people that don't want to have a physical copy can just do it online. So I don't know how to do that. It's on my list of things to do. Getting my books turned into audiobooks is also on my list of things to do. I have a guy, Paul, I don't know if he's around. Paul is going to help me with sound. He helped me with the affirmation and relaxation video I did a couple years ago. And so we're working on it. I keep telling myself, I'm like, the good news is kind of once you go through it, then going through it the first time it's always the hardest. So the next time I do this, should be like a lot smoother. So we'll see. Oh, Kevin says, my cat is as old as time and she's getting a bit wobbly. Oh, kitty. Oh, old kitties are so cute. All kitties are so cute. Truth Seeker is here. James asks, what kind of editing software do you use? I don't know. You probably don't want to do anything that I'm doing, to be honest. So, like, as far as sound or editing, goes, I normally just use like Windows, whatever, it's like Movie Maker. I don't really edit my videos. If you've probably noticed that. Uh, and there's a couple of reasons for that. I was trying when I was actually doing the recorded videos, and it's been a while. It's been like a year and a half since I actually did like a recorded video. Um, I Man, I was so nervous about everything back in those days, and one of the things I was nervous about is I knew a lot of people had PTSD. And so I didn't want to have a lot of jump cuts in my video because it just kind of makes a person anxious. And so I would force myself to do all these videos in one take. And that, is incredibly stressful and I wasn't reading a script. I'd write down notes, like points to touch on, and then just go live or just record the video. So that added another challenge to it. I know a lot of people use, what is it, like Adobe? There's some sort of video editing thing for Adobe. Uh, but like I said, I would just start and then realize that you're going to get better with time. As far as microphones and sound and stuff go, I really do like my microphone. And this is an ATR, what is it, 2100. You can get these on Amazon. I think they're like $80 and they're totally worth it. But even then, you might want to hold off on spending any money until this is something that you decide that you want to do, you know? So, okay. Let's see here. Ileana says this video is unavailable. There's a dim screen with actual video feed behind it. Hey, Travis. He's my tech support. Okay, we're going to see if we can get this figured out. Jennifer's saying not for me, that she's seeing video. Reloaded live stream. People are saying that the video is not showing correctly. Are you watching downstairs? You have to reload YouTube? Like refresh? Huh. Okay. Well, I guess the word on the street is to just refresh YouTube and then it comes back okay. I don't know. It's weird. On my screen, I have two different screens going, and one of them shows that black static and says video unavailable. So I don't know. That's so weird. Sarah says, my husband works in IT and he says to refresh. Yeah, makes sense. Okay, let me scroll up. Will's girl says, I know this suspected narcissist. I think I dodged either being assaulted or killed by them. I noticed the conditioning and love bombing and the brainwashing attempts, but rarely addressed it. Oh, where's the rest of the question? I decided to ... The suspense. See if we can find the rest of the question. Maybe she didn't write it. Well, we'll address what you did say, and that the whole love bombing and the conditioning and the brainwashing and that kind of stuff. Yeah. If you notice things are starting to get just squirrely or off, or you get a dark vibe, or it's just even simply, this isn't the situation that you're looking for. Like, it doesn't have to be, dangerous, destructive, or deadly in order for us to leave. Like, it can simply just be like, you know what? I don't have enough in common with this person. This is just not going to work. That's a valid enough reason to leave. But yeah, I would definitely recommend, if you get that dark feeling, you feel like you're going to be either assaulted or killed, like, get out of there. Because we normally don't get that kind of feeling about a person or a situation unless there's a reason for it. And James Says, haha, that's a very honest answer. One take would be hard. Yeah. Maybe I'll try to write notes so I don't go all Dwayne. LOL. Well, yeah, I would just do like a point by point outline. But I've seen other YouTubers, and this is really clever. Like they'll have, you can tell that they have a partial script, and then they'll jump to a series of pictures, and then they'll just read basically while they're showing pictures, and then they'll cut back to them. So it looks like they're just talking naturally, but really it's just a very clever way to hide that it's scripted. So, another tip would be to find YouTube channels that you like the style of their videos, that you like their thumbnails, that you like how they're doing it, and then just kind of reverse engineer it. That helps a lot. And it takes a while. It takes a while to kind of find your voice. It's weird. It takes practice being yourself. That's such a strange thing, but it does. And you'll kind of get into your rhythm and your flow in time, and it just takes practice, but you got to get started in order to start practicing. When the Narc Bark says, Dana, I love the red mug. Yes, thank you. Me too. It's it's like my bowl of tea. It's so good. So very, very good. I've been thinking about getting a more dainty teacup lately. I'm on the hunt for a more dainty teacup. Alcuda Babe says, so how do you publish books to be pre-approved? I'm not sure what you mean by like the author copies, like my journal, like this thing. It's a process. It's a process. There's a couple different companies that you can go through. You know what? I could do another video for those that are curious about the book writing process and talk much more about that, because it's pretty in depth, and I don't want to bore people to tears if they don't want to if they don't want to hear me talk about it. But I think especially survivors tend to have a book inside of them. Everybody's gone through such just tremendous, excruciating experiences that I think tend to kind of make for a good book. And I think it can be really cathartic to just share your story, whether or not you ever publish it. Sometimes I think just writing it down or posting it on a blog anonymously or what have you can be really healing in and of itself. But the cool thing nowadays with self-publishing is it's gotten rid of the middleman. It used to be before you had to have an agent and you had to get picked up with the publishing house and on and on and on. And now pretty much anybody can publish a book to Amazon. And, but it's like I said, it's like anything else, figuring out how to go about it, and it takes practice. Got to just stick with it, dig your heels in, because there's about a dozen, 3 dozen different points of like massive frustration with the process. And again, I guess it's like with anything else, getting a good group. So I'm in several different writers groups. And that really helps, because if you're going through this, whatever it is, whatever you're going through alone, it can really feel like, oh, it's just me. Like nobody else goes through this. Like it's just me, But when you're in a group, when you hear the struggles that other people have, and the successes, like it's cool because you realize what's possible, and then you also realize, okay, I'm not alone. Like that's not like the dumbest question ever. Like a lot of people have this question. So okay. Grace says, yay, Dana, I love the journal. Good job. Thank you. I'm so excited about it. I love it so much. And I hope that you guys love it too. And I'm excited to go look and see what the formatter came up with today. So yay for that. And then, I don't even know if I told you guys this. So what we're going to do because I realized this sizing of this thing is just, I mean, this thing is heavy because it's also hardcover. It's just this like, it's like an old algebra book when you were in high school. Like this thing is massive. Uh, but I decided, because I know some people like to write, there's like different styles of journaling out there, and the like 3-year journals, the 5-year journals, those kinds of things, they um, tend to only allow for a few lines of reflection each day. So what I'm doing is I made this journal into a 3-year journal, and then I'm also making it into basically like a 1-year journal. So for people that want that extra space, then they would have it. So it'll come out in 2 different versions, which will be cool. And I might even, like, now that I'm saying it out loud, because I know some people like the bigger version, but they might not like a big journal. It's so weird. Like, when it's weird when you think about these, like, there's so many details that go into all of this stuff. So like a lot of people for journals, tend to like it where you can throw it into your bag and fill it out at a coffee shop or whatever. But workbooks are known to be larger. They're like 8 by 12. They allow more room. So I might also reformat this into an 8 by 12 and do a paperback. I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know if that appeals to anybody, but it would give a person, I think, more, well, not I think, it would give a person significantly more room to write. So I don't know. Let me know if that interests you at all. Arlene says, I love big journals. Okay, so that's good. Overcomer says, I absolutely love to journal and reread them months later to see how I've grown. Yes, I know, me too. And these I don't know if you've ever done like a 3-year journal or a 5-year journal, but I love the concept. I didn't understand it at first. Actually, I didn't understand it, and it didn't appeal to me. Like, I was the kind of person, I'm used to doing this type of journaling called morning pages, where you basically either freehand write or you type like 2 or 3 pages, and it's just the stream of consciousness, and you just blah, like, you don't stop. And then you kind of go back through, and it's just a kind of a good way to see what's on your mind that you might not have realized is on your mind. And so the concept of a journal that's where you only write a few sentences, I didn't like that at all. But then my friend was really big on it. And so I began to see the appeal, because I was like, oh, that's so cool. Because you fill out the day. So like you flip to, April 11th, and then you answer that question for that day for that year. But then you move through the journal, 3 years or 5 years time. So you're answering that same question on that day for the next couple years, and if they're kind of insightful questions, like how are you feeling right now and why, things like that, it's really interesting as you work through it to be like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I forgot about this, or, oh, you just remember how you were feeling back then and how far you've come. And yeah, I think it'll be neat. Karen says, Dana, what are your top 5 qualities of a healthy relationship? And could you please recommend a book about healthy relationships? Sure. Top 5 qualities. I think the foundational pieces, which are, I would say, universal to everybody, would be open, honest, sincere, solutions-oriented communication, trust, and I guess those would be the top 5, like foundational pieces there on which to build. If any one of those 5 pieces are missing, then there is no relationship present. Like, it's just going to be chaos. Because the opposite of that, right, is instead of open communication, you'd have closed communication, which tends to be conversations that aren't had, silent treatment, passive aggressive kind of stuff. Nobody's talking about anything. You're people just shutting down. So, okay, open, honest. So the opposite of that would be dishonest. So a relationship with a person who lies all the time, that's not going to work. Open, honest, sincere. So then the opposite would be insincere. So lying, manipulation, that doesn't work. Sincere, solutions oriented. If the communication, if people don't have the ability to work as a team player and kind of have a healthy degree of compromise, then it's also not going to work. If there's no, and then trust would be the fifth one. If there's no trust there, and trust, I think, is also a byproduct of those four things, because trust takes time, and appropriate trust is trust that's earned over time based off of those four things over a period of time, right? So trust is a must. Uh, so those would be the foundational pieces. On top of that, then it's going to really depend on you. And it's going to depend on what makes you you and what's important to you. So, for example, if you really love animals and want a whole house full of animals, or children, or no children, or your religion is really important to you, these kinds of things, then that's going to be important criteria as well for you in a relationship. So then just kind of knowing yourself well enough to be like, you know what, this is a must. Like, I need somebody that I have these things in common with. Like, certain things may be workable, but there might be certain things with you that are not, and that's okay too. As far as a book on healthy relationships, I was kind of knocking this book the other day, but it was more the context of the book that I meant to knock. And the book is on love languages. So I think that's a fantastic book, only within the context of a healthy relationship. So Angie and I think we're talking about, I don't know, maybe it was last week. I don't know. It all blurs together for me. But we're talking about the frustration of people getting into couples counseling, and one partner is abusive or incredibly manipulative, and the therapist basically gives them a book on love languages and then kind of encourages them to attend, some sort of couples retreat, and sends them on their way. And that is, kind of the wrong it's maybe it's the wrong treatment to the wrong problem, So in that context, I'm not a fan of that, because then what happens is the target of the abuse is working themselves into overdrive, thinking that this is a relationship issue, that communication can improve it, that they just need to be more compassionate or more understanding or learn their partner better. And none of that's the issue. Like, the issue is that you're in a manipulationship, you're not in a relationship. And if you're in a manipulationship with the pathological person who's chronically lying and manipulating and cheating and stealing and God knows what, like, there is no knowing their love languages isn't going to fix anything. And it's so, yeah. But that book, in context of a healthy relationship, I think is fantastic. And even within, I think, friendship situations, it's a different way, I think, to understand how we communicate with each other, and that different people like to be shown that they're important and that they matter in different ways. So I don't know. That's what I vote for. What do you guys think? Do you have any books that you would recommend? Let's see. Jennifer is talking about, I think, a book, and says, I would put my story at the end and have the proceeds go to an abuse charity or something. Yeah, I like that. I was thinking about doing a book of survivor stories, people that obviously that would, authorize, and then we would change details and all that. Thinking about doing a book of survivor stories and then doing the same, like having 100% of the proceeds going to some, I have so many projects that I want to do, but like having those proceeds go into a special pot that we can apply to doing something. I mean, we can vote on it as a community or what have you. I think that would be cool on so many levels, because then it would give us a chance as a community to well, I think it'd be fun to just have other people go through the book writing process, because that's always entertaining to kind of see the behind the scenes of it all. And then, so to go through that process with, a few dozen people or whoever wants to be a part of it, and we can all vote on stuff and compile the book and then decide where the funds are going to go. And we can vote on that. And then I can have maybe a section on my website that I can keep updated, because I think that's always fun to kind of keep a running total. So people, just the transparency of it, to see like, okay, this is what we did with the book and here's how it's doing, and just kind of updates. And then I don't know, it'd be fun to have that ownership of it. And then to have people, I think, to turn your pain into your power and to kind of take something that's really tragic and use it to put a lot of good out into the world, I think would just be really cool. So if you ever decide to write a book, Jennifer, or anybody, I think I'll do some YouTube videos about that. And then we can see about kind of touch and base. So, because like I said, it's quite the process. And I can be more than willing to share with you what I have learned so far, but keeping in mind, I'm new. I'm new to this journey too. So, but I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot so far. New Chris says, I've been trying to integrate something that was in the book Necessary Endings, adding energy to a new routine. So for example, getting a physical therapist, etc. It really helps. Yeah. Yeah, very cool. I think one of my biggest takeaways, I was just thinking about that book today. It's funny that you mentioned that. One of my biggest takeaways from that book was on the concept of letting go. And I really think that's been the only book that I've ever read outside of anything that has to do with like Buddhism that really talks about the concept of realizing like it's all like we have to let it go, because life is about transition and life is about change. And so much of the suffering that we tend to get caught up in has to do with struggling to let things go, whatever that might be. Like in Buddhism, Buddha talked about the main causes of suffering being like clinging and craving. And so kind of like clinging to the past, clinging to what was, or craving what's in the future. But like if you're always clinging or craving, then you're not in the present moment. And that causes us pain. So, and with that whole book, Necessary Endings, kind of realizing that letting go is it's important that we learn how to do that. And it's interesting because we don't talk about letting go of things, right? And so then we're not prepared for these things when they happen. Like if we lose a job, or even if we quit a job and start a new job, or if somebody dies or a relationship ends, we don't talk about these transitional periods. And so everybody kind of tends to feel embarrassed or ashamed, or like something's really wrong with them, that they're not handling it well. But I think it would do everybody a lot of good if we, talked about all of this before it happened. So I don't know. That was a fantastic book. That was one of my favorites, I think, that we've read so far. Okay, let me scroll up here. Overcomer says, I am in LA. Can anyone share the days and times Dana is on live? Also, how much time do we have left? I can answer that. I go live every Wednesday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we go for about 3 hours. So it's every Wednesday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 hours. So what is it? It's like 9:20 now. So you've plenty of time. And then Angie Atkinson and I go live every Tuesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for about an hour. And we alternate YouTube channels. So next week, it's going to be my YouTube channel. If you want to catch that, it's the same kind of thing, Q&A kind of a thing. Jennifer says, about 5 years ago, when I came out about my sexual abuse, I thought a goal I could do is a photography/abuse storybook. But then I thought people wouldn't want to publish their stories. I think you would be surprised. I think there's a lot of people that really want to share what happened to them. They just don't know how. So there was a book I came across um, the other day, and I wish I remembered. It was such a cool concept. It's kind of along the lines of, well, kind of along the lines of what you're talking about. It was a gal who turned her experience with abuse into a graphic novel. And I just loved that because you could, you had the pictures and it was just, you could kind of follow along with the whole storyline. It was a very creative, clever way of approaching this whole topic in a very easy to understand way. And I think just a more approachable way in general. It was fantastic, brilliant idea. So, if you do ask people, you can always say, hey, you know what, this is what I want to do, and I'm thinking about making it anonymous. And so uh, I would change, certain details of your story. I would change the names of people involved and kind of letting them know. And you could always make the changes to their story and then email it back to them and say, hey, how does this sound? And then kind of go back and forth. And sassy, sassy little Frassy says, oh, my tea. She says, my tea is the Yogi Egyptian licorice. She says, I am hooked. It is so good. I know, right? It is so good. It's like the perfect tea. I don't know if I told you, I went to this, there's this tea company in my area that is real fancy and they're worldwide. And I went to this whole I don't even know what you'd call it, like tea tasting thing that they had at the museum, just a fun random thing to do on a Sunday. And I know very little about tea. Like, more of a coffee drinker, but I like a good cup of tea every now and again. And so this guy is going on and on, this is how you brew it and the temperature of I had no idea there was so much involved. This, certain how you steep tea and how long you steep it for and the flavor and the bitterness. And these teas were like, really expensive. And all I could think of was, man, my yogi tea's got it going on. It's like $3 a box. Best tea I've ever had. I'd take this any day of the week over the stuff we were drinking at that fancy tea party. Nisi says, back to books, says, yes, I feel like I can write 10 books after 13 years of narcissistic abuse and 10 more after leaving. Yeah, completely. When I started actually writing, so when I left, when my whole situation the first time ended, it was such like a uniquely horrific, but also unique experience in my life. And I knew that I wanted to write about it before it even turned south. We were living off the grid. It was just this very interesting life that we had. So I knew that I wanted to write about it. And then when things started to turn south and became like this Lifetime TV movie, I also knew that down the road, I wanted to write about it. But it took me like 5 or 6 years before I even started getting close to being ready to do that. And I started there. I mean, don't get me wrong, like, there were times where I would start writing and I would get maybe like a paragraph in and I'm like, I can't, like, I just don't want to revisit. It's still too fresh. And I still haven't written down everything. I have a whole box. Like I have these, when I start working on a book, I do like an outline and I'll write down ideas and I'll keep them in like a flashcard box like this. And then I can reorganize the ideas. And so I did that for that book on my whole story, where I wrote down things just because it's amazing the stuff that you forget. So I wanted to make sure that I kind of hit a bunch of high points so I wouldn't forget. And then I put it in that box. So I still have that box, but I didn't start working on that story. I really haven't. Like, that's as far as I've gotten. But once I started my blog, it was like a dam burst inside of me. And I just began writing and writing and writing and writing and writing and writing. And I was probably putting out, I would say, God, those early days, that first 90 days or so, probably 3 blog posts a day. Like I was just on fire, and it it was just intense. And then when I discovered YouTube, because a friend of mine who I hadn't talked to in years had called me, it was just a fluke thing. And I was telling her what had happened in my life, and um, that what I was doing with this blog and everything. And she was like, "Oh my God." Because I'd never told her, or like a lot of people, like the full everything that happened, because I had a lot of shame and embarrassment around it for a long time. So when I told her, she's like, this is intense. Like you should really do a podcast and just talking about your experiences and lessons learned and everything. But I didn't know how to do a podcast. So I'm like, well, I'll just start with you. I'll just start with YouTube. And so I started putting videos out on YouTube. And then that became compulsive too, because it was, again, like this dam that burst. And so it took me like I would say like the first 5 or 6 months of my blog and my YouTube channel, I just kept videos, blogs. It was just like a fire hydrant of realizations, and I just needed to get it all out of my system. And then when I began writing books, it was the same thing. So I probably have, I don't even know, 15 different books started, and all this whole pile of ideas. And, and it's good that the well is never dry, but at the same time, it can be really just exhausting, because I think for a lot of people, they have this idea that writing, and maybe it's this way for certain people, that writing is this very kind of like soothing, relaxing, kind of, therapeutic thing. And for me, when I'm in the midst of doing something like that, it's not like that at all. It's like food poisoning. And it's just this like pressured need of like, I've got to get this out of my body. And it'll wake me up in the middle of the night. The urge to write will hit me when I'm out with friends, or when I'm watching TV, or when I'm in the shower. And it's just this mad dash to go get these ideas out, because it feels like food poisoning. Like you just don't have a choice. Like you just have got to get it out of your system. It's crazy. So I hear you on that, of having a bunch of books. And you know what? Frankly, I think there is a real need for this topic to be covered by people that have lived through it, because I just don't know if there can be too much information out there about what we experience, because for starters, we all experience, it's that similar level of craziness, but everybody's experience is different. And so you just kind of never know if your experience is really going to resonate with somebody else. And generally when it does, it's the coolest feeling in the whole wide world, because it's that realization of they got a piece of that closure that it's been denied to them for so long. And that's that's just such a cool feeling. Diane says, I rented a great movie documentary last night. Do tell. Do tell. I love documentaries. Oh, AB says, what was the tea that you recommended? Like the kind from Aveda, but it was from Amazon. You can get it I don't know, maybe you can't, depending on the grocery store. It's called Yogi, YOGI, and it's a Egyptian licorice. They also make an Egyptian licorice mint, but I don't know if I really noticed a huge difference between the two of them. If you have a very sensitive palate, you might, but I like the Egyptian licorice if I had to choose. It literally, it's like, it is the Aveda tea. It is. I can't tell a difference. It's perfect. Like you don't need to add anything to it. It's just the perfect flavor. Okay, let me scroll up here. Camilla says, Dana, I would really like your advice on something. Okay, go for it. Let me scroll down and see if you asked, see if you mentioned what more details here. And then in the meantime, the Narc Barks says, what do you do when you see your narcissist out of nowhere and the anxiety kicks in? How do we get out of it? Any tips or tricks? Well, I'm a big fan of anticipation. I think that's kind of the biggest tool we can have in our toolkit. So if you can kind of emotionally and mentally prepare yourself for seeing your ex out in public, then you're not going to feel so knocked off balance. It'll still feel, that you're a little knocked off balance, but it won't be such a shock. So then you kind of have some phrases that you can say, or something that you can do. So if you see him out in public, maybe you decide ahead of time, you anticipate, okay, then I'm going to grab my phone and quickly call somebody, or just pretend that you're on your phone, go on Facebook. Just something to distract you so you don't have to talk to them, or that you can pretend like you're busy, or um, whatnot. Or if they come up and talk to you, how are you going to handle that? Like, what might you say? You know, uh, and depending on the situation, might kind of depend on what you have to say. But I would recommend, at a minimum, like just kind of going gray rock and trying to just act cool, like, hey, totally no big deal that I see you. Couldn't care less. Like, you're not a big deal. What we had, not a big deal. Just very casual, like they're an old neighbor that you've run into. Just that level of emotional detachment that will throw them for a loop. So just staying cool, calm, and collected, totally emotionally detached. And then, you know, ideally get out of there sooner than later. Just kind of keep it brief. Like, hey, and if they say something like, oh, it was great seeing you, or whatever, like, I've got an appointment in like 10 minutes. I got to go. Like, I got to go. So, or instead of saying it was great to see you, like, oh, it was really wild to run into you today. I wasn't expecting that. I got an appointment. I've got to go. So having some sort of the words that you're going to say at a time can really help. Okay, let's see. AB says, thank you for the tea recommendation. I can't wait to get some. I hope you like it. You have to let me know. I think it's the best. Oh, yikes. When the narc bark says, I'm 10 months no contact, and he came by with his car, he honked and cut me off. Yeah, they do that kind of stuff just to ruffle you. I would just kind of document it, and maybe if you can start kind of changing the way that you are going to work or wherever you were going. So kind of changing up your routine, because that could also, it could be a coincidence that he saw you, but it could also be hey, beep, beep. I, this is not a coincidence, basically. Like, I know that you're leaving work, and just wanted to really ruffle you, kind of a thing. So you might kind of want to change up the way that you're going. Okay, let's see here. Scrolling. And Diane says, oh my gosh, yeah, the shame and embarrassment. I'm still hiding from it all. Yeah, it's hard, Normal, decent people, it's it's hard for a normal, decent person to even begin to comprehend the the absolute lack of a conscience that another person can have. It's just so deep that it just comes in waves, because it's like our mind can't, it's just outside of the realm of what we can even comprehend. Even if we like stretch our thinking to what a person might do, we're still stunned as to how far a person could actually take it. So it's not just you. It's not. Well, that's good. Caroline says, yes, our therapist was on to him and challenged his triangulation during our sessions. She would lead sessions like she wasn't going to let him target me. Personal problems are not relationship problems. Good for her. Yeah. And that's how that should go down. Couples therapy shouldn't be a way for them to have an audience, or for them a way to them for them to be abusive, and or to obviously try to not manipulate the therapist, um, which they can oftentimes do incredibly easily if you get a therapist who tends to be a normal good person and who has trouble seeing manipulative behavior in action. James is asking about my tea. He says, not even sugar, not even sugar. It's perfect tea, perfectly sweet. Couldn't, if I had a magic wand, I would not change a thing about this tea. It is delicious. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, that's a big one. Overcomer says, shame for me meant I could not forgive myself about putting myself in such a horrible situation. I then realized I was not perfect. I'm human and it's okay to make mistakes. Yeah, yeah. I like that. It's so true. We did the best we could with the understandings that we had at the time. And that's all anybody can do. I mean, most normal, decent people just don't even comprehend that they could get tangled up with somebody like this. And then if they did get tangled up with them, that they would somehow know. I mean, abusive relationships like this, it truly it starts off like a whirlwind more times than not, and then it ends up like a tornado. And then people that get caught up in it are left just like scratching their head, and they're like, "Oh my god, like everything around me is destroyed. Like how did I get here, and where am I, and how do I even begin to rebuild?" It's really overwhelming. So, yeah, it's just manipulation really does create a fog, and it's intense, and it's can be very overwhelming. Jennifer's talking about her story and says, I have three parts to my story. So sometimes a memoir type thing seems overwhelming. The narc abuse from my dad and stepsister slash best friend, having an unmedicated mother that would go through 6 months of mania every couple years my whole life, and sexual abuse from my father that went on for 8 years. My brain feels so unorganized. Yeah, that's a lot. And writing a book in general is it's a process to organize your thoughts, even if it's not even related to this topic. So it's a process to get organized anyhow, especially when you're talking about some major stuff where it's going to be, it's a lot of really heavy stuff that there's probably a lot of stress still surrounding, and it can be difficult to kind of be alone with all of the memories from all of that too. So as you go to write it, and you might, if you did start, I like your idea of doing it in 3 sections. And so maybe if you did do a book, you would have, 3 sections, like you were saying, and have it just be like the first section called dad, like in quotations. And then you just write about him. And then the second section, it's stepmom. And then the third section, it's the, step Becky, whoever, the stepsister, whoever. And so, and then you can, so then it's just kind of like organized by person, or you could organize it by theme, and then there's lots of different ways that you could go about organizing it. And oftentimes writing a book, there's this initial stage, like that first draft, where it's just a brain dump. Like you just kind of get all of the information out. And then so it's like dumping a puzzle out onto the table. Like once you have all the pieces out, then you can start assembling it into some sort of cohesive shape. So it's a process, and of kind of going through this and thinking about, okay, well, what, and you'll know, like, it's sort of like really like putting a puzzle together. Like once those pieces start clicking into place, you know that you're on the right track. And every book is different. So there is no real right way or wrong way. It's just kind of what resonates with you. So, it might be that you organize it by person. It might be that you organize it by theme. So maybe you have, I don't know, I'm just saying like 7 different themes in your book. And so the first one maybe is confusion. And then you just talk about confusion within these 3 different circumstances. Or then you talk about anger or denial or, uh, I don't know, any number, embarrassment, shame, um, these kinds of emotions. So you're organizing it by emotions. And then maybe like the last chapter is like moving forward or hope, something like that. So I don't know. I think you'll know once you start kind of getting into it and playing around with the formatting of all of it, and you'll be like, okay, this is how I want to tell my story. But that's a lot of heavy stuff. If as you're going through writing that, I would strongly encourage you to really make it a point to continue to check in with yourself on a regular basis to see how you're doing with all of that. That's heavy stuff that's going to be coming up. So I don't know if you currently have a therapist or if you're in a support group or both, or, you know, kind of checking in with yourself and thinking, okay, what do I, it's great to write these books and to get this out into the world, but um, you don't want to completely overwhelm yourself with the process either. Because like I said, it can be really intense once that dam does burst and you do start talking about it, it can be intense. Okay, let me scroll down here. Okay. Um, Let me scroll up here. Lots of questions. Yeah, Jennifer says, the weird thing is with my childhood, it didn't feel stressful in the moment, even being bullied at school because it was so normal. It's now that I'm piecing things together, like, how did I even survive? And that, what you just said, is something that I think every single person who's gone through any type of abuse can totally relate to that. So, depending on how you're going to organize your book, like being exactly saying what you're saying and just set, like it's weird how people perceive abuse, especially if you grow up with that, where it might just be this is just normal. Like that your normal is off, but you're not sure in what ways. And then you just start assembling the pieces as an adult, kind of with the hindsight that we have, and start seeing like, okay, this is how these certain things happened. But I like that. I highly recommend that you copy and paste what you just wrote into a Word document because that was really well said. Okay. Scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. Oh, hello. All that Kaz. Thank you for the live stream donation. Says, hi, Dana. I've been at university, so I've missed some live streams lately. I've been doing really well, learning a lot about communication. Thank you for your support. Very cool. I'm so glad to hear from you. So good deal. We are having technical difficulties tonight, if you guys haven't noticed. So if your YouTube screen is going staticky and says this video is unavailable, please refresh YouTube. Okay, let me scroll here. Yeah, right. Maria, hi Maria, says, I always heard about negative projection, but I never ever thought about how we could project our good qualities onto people equally. I honestly thought all people had empathy, minus serial killers. Little did I know. Right? I hear you completely. I don't know if you're reading the book club book that we're reading for this month is called The Sociopath Next Door. And it's it's an interesting book on a couple different levels. And one of the things in there that she touches on, which I really like, is kind of this progression of how people, human beings in general, have come to understand the concept of having a conscience. So I've never come across a book that's actually kind of followed that progression. So she talks about it in terms of, kind of at first that was based around religion, that God gave us a sense of, morals come from God, basically. And so there was this very heavy, like theological basis to it. And then that kind of advanced or chain evolved, however you want to say that, grew into um, um, philosophy with different philosophers, kind of thinking that no, conscience is just something that people tend to have. Like we're just all born with it, that bad behavior is a choice. And then kind of where we are today is more with like psychology, that it's kind of a nature versus nurture. We're kind of born with it and we're kind of not. But I don't know. So anyways, in the book, she really explores the concept of conscience and, why people struggle with, understanding that some people just don't have it. But, I think it just goes back to it's we just tend to think that we can see evil coming. And most of the time we can't. Like it just takes time and we don't see the actions. We tend to see like the results of the actions and like the damage that's done. So but yeah, I thought the same thing. I didn't realize, and I like that the point that you bring up about projection and kind of this whole reverse projection. So, like with projection, like Maria's talking about, like the more of the negative projection, it's something that everybody does. We tend to do it subconsciously, but it's when we have uncomfortable thoughts or feelings about a topic, we have this psychological need to get rid of them. And so one of the ways that our brain does this is that it projects it onto the other person. And it's really weird. And of course, it's a lot easier to see other people doing this to us than it is when we tend to do it to other people. But if we don't experience a lot of uncomfortable thoughts or feelings, we obviously don't do it as often as somebody who does experience a lot of uncomfortable thoughts and feelings. So, for example, if you're being accused of doing things that you're not doing, cheating, lying, stealing, plotting against them, those kinds of things, that tends to be them projecting their thoughts and feelings onto you. So that's a whole nother level of kind of confusing and crazy making because, all of a sudden we're being accused of things that we're not doing and trying to defend yourself against that's insane. But what's even more insane is that they're thinking and they're having these thoughts and feelings, accusing us of having these thoughts and feelings, and then punishing us for that. So it's like they're punishing us for the thoughts and feelings that they have that they can't handle. It's just like blah, crazy. So yeah, that's projection, kind of reverse projection in terms of, I think what normal, decent people do is instead of, so that, the projection itself is un- taking uncomfortable thoughts and feelings and putting them on to somebody else. That reverse projection is us taking comfortable thoughts and feelings and then putting them onto somebody else. So basically assigning other people the qualities that we might have. So if we are honest and good, we're going to assume that somebody else is going to be honest and good. So there's a concept for this. It's called a just world concept. And basically that if the world is fair and just, and it's going to treat us how according it's going to treat us how we treat them, kind of a thing. And that's not the case at all. So, not with pathological people, anyhow. But yeah, it's a very big eye opener. Okay. Let me scroll up here. Uh, when the narc bark says, I opened my big mouth and I need to make a savings and move out. Any help you guys can give me to build credit and moving out, please message me. Yeah, that's a good topic. I'll have to think about some resources. I think a lot of people are in that boat, and those are some important skills to have for sure. So, um, let me make a note of that. Let me kind of chew on that and see kind of what I can come up with. Oftentimes, if you go to the bank, they can give you some um, uh, kind of resources on opening a savings account and things you need to know with building credit. If you can open up an account, and normally you can depending on where you live, if you live in the United States, sometimes you can open up an account for $20, and then if you have more money, then that's great. And then you could ask your bank, hey, can I open up like a Visa card as well? So normally, at least here in the US, in order to start building credit, it it helps to have like three different revolving types of credit. So a car loan, and maybe two credit cards, that kind of thing. Things that you want to show that you're paying off every month on time to just kind of build up that credit history. So if you're opening credit cards, like some credit cards report to credit bureaus and some don't. So, like prepaid cards that you get online, I don't think that those do. So, but your bank credit card would. So that would be something. And then you kind of figuring out too, kind of what counts, kind of what all goes on a credit report. So let me see if I can dig up some resources for you, and I will get back to you about that. Credit reporting accounts. Okay, let me scroll up here. Okay, she says, yeah, I live in California. Okay, good deal. Yeah, Maria says the author therapist Sandra Brown says to look at personality disorders as permanent disorders. I find that so helpful. It stops my tendencies to want to believe and hope that all people can change. Yeah. I think especially certain personality disorders on very very much so, you know. And people in general, I think if we just realize it's really difficult, it's change is difficult. As human beings, we are not really wired to change. We're wired for consistency. And and even for us, with our lives not working, if we're having this string of like kind of failed relationships, failed friendships, we're suffering a lot of pain. And um, with all of these toxic people in our life, even you would think that we would be really motivated to change, but even still, it takes an awful lot of energy and effort and insight to realize kind of what's going on. And you know working on our learning to love ourselves, like that should not be like this massive uphill climb that it often is for so many of us, but it change is difficult. But yeah, I think it can be helpful too to just kind of realize, um, our personalities formed pretty young in life, and why people are the way they are, probably a mix of nature or nurture. And everybody's different for a wide variety of reasons. And it can be really unfortunate if a person does go through something traumatic, and then they kind of build up this whole, really kind of traumatized personality around it. But I think realizing that we can't fix them, like that's going to have to be an inside job. It would be like you trying to fix me or me trying to fix you. Like it's just not going to work. And even if we want it to work, right? Like you and I are both here in the chat and we're both super interested and like dedicated to making our lives work and all of this. But at the end of the day, it's up to me and it's up to you to do the hard work of the work of actually changing and sitting with the uncomfortable feelings and kind of getting comfortable with being uncomfortable and doing something different in our life. But yeah, manipulative. And this is another point that she touched on in the book, and I completely agree, is, the understanding that there's people out there that just don't have a conscience, and we don't really know why. There's been lots of different theories about why this is, but it's they know that they exist and they see the world in a very different way and they're placed in the world in a very different way. And it's important for us to realize that. So, I think it was the other book. I want to say it's either The Body Keeps the Score or that Pete Walker book, the CPTSD Surviving to Thriving book, where they were talking about going through this different, like a Rorschach ink blot tests and how different people at different ages that had been, or not even necessarily those, but drawings in general, like uh, how trauma at different ages shaped a person's brain and they just saw the world in a very different way. It was really tragic and but fascinating at the same time to just realize like that we all like live here and that people can have such drastically different impressions of what's going on around them. So, okay. And Truth Seeker is talking about the golden rule. She says it does not work with narcissists. No. Yeah. With manipulative people like that are driven kind of by domination and deceit, and that they just don't have a conscience. There is no, like, there is no working towards a solution. There is no teamwork. There is no anything. Like everything with them is a game. And it's absolutely exhausting. And you just, it's not workable. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Yeah. Maria says, and Sandra L. Brown also says, getting seriously involved with somebody who's suffering from mental illness means a lifetime commitment to somebody else's pain. Is that what you really want? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, if it's untreated, I mean, thankfully nowadays with medication, there's, as a former psych nurse, like there's such a range. There's people out there that you would never guess struggle with mental illness, that bipolar, schizophrenia, that are on the right medications. It's radically changed their life. Like you just would never guess that they struggle with that. Like they're amazing people, like they're cool, they're easy to be around. No science of visible mental illness whatsoever. Then there's people on the opposite side of the spectrum, which may be struggling with even the same mental illnesses, and maybe they're not motivated to take their medication. Maybe they don't think that they have a problem. Maybe they have trouble even finding the right medication. That's kind of especially tragic. Uh, and then there's some people that are kind of in between, that maybe the medication sometimes works and sometimes it doesn't work. And they're kind of always in this process. But it's a real challenge for people that are in relationships with people that are struggling with some very real, mental illness going on. And, and And then different types of kind of personality stuff as well, like intermittent explosive disorder, or kind of different attachment disorders, or even borderline personality disorder, these kinds of things. And that can even get a person confused, because they're like, well, these some of these things do have treatments, right? Like bipolar, there is treatment for this, and there is treatment for borderline personality disorder, like, and there is treatment for anorexia or alcoholism. But just because there's treatment for it too doesn't mean that that person is going to be ready, willing, or able to actually go through the treatment. So it's hard letting go of hope, and kind of seeing the situation clearly, and then thinking about, okay, what getting real with yourself, like, what can I actually handle, what can I take on, and what's workable for me, what's not workable for me. So, and everybody's got their line, and that's totally okay. And if it's like major behavioral stuff, I mean, for me, I would be out the door. Like, I just don't want to deal with any of that. And I wouldn't want, if I was dating somebody and they had, kids that were just off the wall, and, a total handful. I had a friend who was so in love with this one guy, and he had the most absolutely awful teenagers. She was terrified of them. Like, one of them was on drugs. It was just bad. And she had younger children, and she ended up having to break up with him because she's like, I can't have this around my children, and it tore her heart out. But she's like, I doesn't matter how much I love him. Like, I can't have his kids around my kids. Like, this just isn't going to work. So it's knowing for sure, like, your deal breakers with stuff. Uh, I think too, kind of back to that whole, um, treatment stuff. Rick says, why would somebody pay a therapist and then go there and lie to them? She is in a downward spiral now and is going to therapy every other week. Well, I mean, for lots of different reasons. I mean, is she aware that she's lying? And I guess, how do you know? Like, how do you know she's lying? Do you go with her? Because I'll tell you, oftentimes, like, our perception of events, and especially if you're dealing with a person who has a personality disorder, their perception of events are going to be very, very different. And that can be a real challenge with people that, uh, especially narcissists, sociopaths, even a lot of like borderline personality disorder. If they're more on like that manipulative side, they can see they're always the perpetual victim. And don't get me wrong, I know a lot of people probably in this chat have been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And kind of in my 2 cents of it all is, I think there's two very different types of borderline personality disorder. And it's just from what I've experienced as a psych nurse, and just kind of people I've known in life, and people talking in here. I think one type tends to be more of like a traumatized codependent type personality that tends to, and that maybe that's even harsh, for lack of a better term, traumatized empath, maybe is a better term, a person who's highly in tune with other people's feelings, and they continue to get tangled up in like the wrong types of relationships, and they don't know what's going on. So their emotions are just, of course, right? Like, they've been incredibly traumatized. They're all over the place. Then there's more of like, it's almost like a really dramatic narcissist, like that type. It's like a traumatized narcissist. So that traumatized narcissist is just, they're constantly like emotionally blackmailing people. Their emotions are, um, very volatile, but also very self-serving. Whereas more of like the traumatized empath tends to be self-harming. But I don't know. To me, there's kind of some different types there. So, if she's just nonstop drama, if she's manipulative, if she's controlling, if she's off this, like, yeah, I think there comes a point where you have to ask yourself, like, do I want a partner or a project? Because she sounds like a project, and that's not a healthy dynamic. So that's something that's worth looking at. That we can't save other people, we can't fix other people. Therapy is only a tool in a toolkit. That person actually has to want to do it. And yeah, there is treatment for borderline personality disorder. Dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT, is fantastic. I think we could all benefit from it. But if it's sort of like the saying goes, like, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. If a person is not at that place that they have the insight into their behavior, and if there's no real sincere, because it's skills, like it's mindfulness skills is kind of what the core of DBT is. If they're not ready, willing, or able to apply those skills on a consistent basis, because you got to practice them, it's a new skill, like learning to ride a bike. It's like anything else, like it just takes practice. Sitting in a DBT class isn't enough. Like, you have to actually practice the skills on a regular basis, you know, in between therapy sessions. So if that's not going on, then there's no sincere change that's happening. And it's sort of like if a person is an alcoholic, just because they go to AA doesn't mean that they're going to get sober. Like, AA doesn't make them sober. AA is a tool in the toolkit, right? So it's important. I think a lot of people get tangled up. They come into these groups and they're like, man, I really think my partner has, borderline personality disorder, especially if they're a woman. Like, I think women are a lot more inclined to be diagnosed as borderline personality, whereas a lot of men tend to be diagnosed as either intermittent explosive disorder or antisocial personality disorder. There's only one, thinking back on all the patients I've worked with over the years, there's only one guy that comes to mind that was borderline personality disorder. And like, yeah, he was a handful. He for sure was. But it's, very, that's not a common, I don't know. It's just my, again, my 2 cents, my observation. It's not a very common diagnosis for guys. So anyways, the point being is, if she's got all this problematic behavior, don't think, oh, well, just because she's borderline, then that means she can be fixed, and that someday down the road we can have this amazing, fulfilling, healthy relationship. Because if you guys have been together for, a handful of years and so far nothing's changed, then, hope is not a strategy. Like, if there's all these tools for her and still nothing different is happening, then it's almost foolish to think that anything different's going to happen, right? Because you're just caught up. It's like Charlie Brown at the football. Charlie Brown runs up to the football, he kicks it, Lucy pulls it out of the way. If you're in over and over and over again, every time Lucy says it'll be different, every time it's not. And if that's the cycle, then it's going to be up to you to decide, okay, where is my line in the sand? When do I need to get off this merry-go-round? Like, when is enough enough? Okay, Camilla. Let's see, let me scroll up here. Okay, let's see. Sorry, scrolling up. Let's see here. Liz asks, how can you tell if a guy is a narcissist while befriending a guy who is just trying to talk? He's talking about himself and his experiences. He tells me he doesn't want to ask me questions because he doesn't want to pry. I guess, how do you know this person? Like, is it just some like rando guy on the internet? Like, who is the guy? And if you don't know him, if it is some like rando guy on the internet, or at work or whatever, generally men don't just try to talk. So, you know, like what is this kind of, is he's kind of slow playing something there, or what, do you see what I'm saying? Like, I don't know if I would need more details. But I guess regardless, at the end of the day, like if you're getting a uh, a weird vibe. Okay, yeah, it sounds like he might be headed to asking you out. If you get a weird vibe, like you don't need to go through with it. And you don't need to, it's that black and white thinking, right? Um of either he's a narcissist and it's a problem, or he's not a narcissist and therefore it's not a problem. Because it's this, any behavior, healthy or problematic, it's all on a spectrum. And then there's certain things that we can talk about, like we talked about earlier, kind of the foundation of what's healthy, open, honest, sincere, solutions oriented communication, trust, like 5 healthy things in a healthy relationship. And then the opposite of that would be in an unhealthy relationship. So like there's some foundational pieces there, but then it really comes down to knowing yourself. So if you're getting like a weird vibe from this guy, if it seems very one-sided, like he's just talking about himself all the time, and you're like, oh, I would totally be open to sharing, but he doesn't even seem interested, and it's just there's not that click, then I would just drive on. Or I mean, you could, if you are interested and you think he is being sincere, you could try shifting the conversation to talking about your day and what's going on with you, and see how he responds to that. And, I think you kind of know pretty soon if another person actually has a sincere interest in what's going on with you in your life. And I would encourage you, that's important too. So I think that would fall into that category of that sincere communication. Does this person actually care? What are your thoughts and your feelings and your hopes and your dreams, and these kind of conversations that have any depth? Are they just letting you talk, or are they actually listening to what you're saying and like processing it in the meaningful way? That's a big, big deal. Because I'll tell you, it's a lonely, I mean, I think you guys can relate. It's a really lonely existence if you have a partner who just is totally checked out, and for whatever reason, and they're just not interested in like what's going on with you or your life or anything. And Maria, great point. Yes, we were talking about this in the support group earlier today. She says, as far as like sobriety and these kinds of things, she says, also, Dana, years of sobriety does not guarantee lasting sobriety. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes. And, especially, I think when you're talking about sobriety, that kind of thing, we had a gal in the group ask, kind of, um, you know, she was thinking about giving her partner another chance. And of course, there's all these different factors around kind of what's going on. Like, does this person, quote unquote, only struggle with addiction, or is there also like abuse and, other issues present? And so, like for addiction, she was saying, well, this person um, only had, I think, like a month or two clean, and was wanting her to give him another chance, and you know, kind of all of this stuff, had been in and out of jail, and and that's the thing, like for a person to really get some like solid clean time, I think before we could even begin to even entertain the idea of seeing if this time would be different. I guess first of all, if there's abuse present, I would just be done. Like that's so deep rooted and such a sign of like major psychological problems that like that's probably never going to get untangled. So for me, that would be an instant deal breaker, because that stuff escalates quickly, and it can, it's going to traumatize you. It's going to traumatize people around you. So your children and everything, like you're playing with fire when you're dealing with abuse. But addiction stuff, I would say really separating your finances, not moving back in together, 18 to 24 months minimum clean time, they need to have a plan. Like, are they going to be going, they need to be going to like AA or NA at least, ideally every single week, ideally multiple times, 3 to 5 times a week in the beginning. Do they have plans to meet with an addiction counselor? Are they going to be able to change all of their friends? There's a lot of work ahead of a person that's struggling with addiction, trying to actually get sober. Because here's the thing, like with change, is wanting to change is not enough. Like we all want. It's the action that makes the difference. And it's that consistent action that matters. A person going to AA or NA for 3 times, that's not like that, just scratching the surface, like and AA says this, like, it works if you work it. Like the program works, but you got to show up. Like you got to do the steps. You got to work it. And it's an ongoing thing. So, I mean, that's the struggle with addiction, and if you're in a relationship with the person who's struggling with addiction, is it's always potentially there. And it can come back with a vengeance at any time. I think that's why it's so important that a person struggling with addiction needs to make a lot of major life changes in order to be able to effectively change. It's really hard. Like, it's really hard to quit drinking if you hang out with a bunch of people that all you ever did was drink. Or do you see what I'm saying? Like, it's just, change is hard. Changing with addiction is, 100 times harder. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And really manipulative people can do a really great job of giving lip service about changing and saying all the right things. This time it'll be different. Give them another chance. Blah 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 blah. But actions will tell over time. See, Polynesia says it works if you work it. I heard that so many times as a kid going to meetings with my mom. LOL. Yeah, and it's, it's true. Okay, gamer Christina, that's a great question. She says, "What if your boss is a narcissist who constantly talks about himself? I'm left rushing at the end of the night because of the time I spend listening to him talk all about himself." Well, pretty much about himself. Okay, so now that like this is a thing, it's probably not going to change. This is the pattern, right? Now you can anticipate. Hey, my boss starts chatting me up at like 10 to 5 and I don't want to hang out here, like talk to this person. So there's a couple things that you can do. You can either just be straight up and say, hey, I've got to go. Like hey, I got to go. I'll see you later. You can kind of pack up your desk at 4:40. So as soon as you hear him coming down the hallway, you grab your keys or you excuse yourself. I've got to run to the bathroom, and then hey, you know what? I got to run to the bathroom and then I got to go. I'll see you tomorrow. then you just go. Or you start, if you're not comfortable doing that, you kind of start planting some seeds of, hey, you've got this new class that you're going to start going to, or this new thing that you're going to start going to at 5:20. You got to be out of there at 5. I'm not a fan of lying. I'd prefer to kind of stay within the bounds of like what's actually going on. But I also realize that being assertive takes practice. And so I guess kind of play around with what could you say that's still kind of within the bounds of truth, and something that you could potentially say 5 days a week when you're there at 5:00, like, hey, I gotta go, I'll see you tomorrow. Wish I could stay and talk. I guess no, you don't, but, oh, that's so interesting. I'll catch up with you tomorrow. Something like that. So to kind of work on that wording. So when that does happen, you've kind of got it nailed down. So you're not so knocked off balance and then sitting there thinking like, like, and he might not realize that he's just boring you to tears. He might just think, oh, she just finds me absolutely riveting. Right. So he may be totally misreading the situation, but if you kind of make it known that you got to go, you'll catch him tomorrow, maybe he might start at least kind of reining it in, and then cornering you during office hours, or you're getting paid to listen to it. Uh, let's see. Oh gosh, Kiara. Yes. Oh, that's so tough. She says, how do you deal with bosses or people who constantly casually degrade us or micromanage us or grind us down with dumb little corrections and comments? I think it depends. If it's a boss, it's that's a different dynamic. Um, if it's a coworker, it's also a different dynamic. So if it's a coworker, then it just so depends on kind of what your boss is like and the situation and whatnot. If you've got this one coworker who is continually coming at you with, uh, wants you to do different things, real micromanaging, you could always say something like, "That's an interesting idea. I'll keep that in mind." And you just kind of like Tai Chi, like they just kind of come at you and you just kind of move out of the way. Like you don't really, like you just don't get caught up in it. And because sometimes people like that, especially if they're like looking for a fight, they want you to object. And sometimes I think people can be really micromanaging, and it's coming from a place of anxiety. It's not really coming from a place of power and control. So if they're coming from more of like this nervous energy about things, and some people, it just can feel like this, like they just really want to help. So it's like very smothering, and they might not realize that they're crossing a line with you. So I think if you can kind of say something like that, that's kind of placating of, that's really interesting. I'll keep that in mind. Or, I'll have to think about that. Again, within the realm of the truth, but it doesn't mean that they're going to say something and then that you're going to automatically do what they want you to do. Like you're going to think about it and go from there, kind of a thing. If it's a boss, that's kind of a different story. That's a little bit more challenging. You could still use kind of that same wording of, I appreciate these suggestions. I'll really have to think about them. So kind of, I guess, just showing a little bit more like respect for, for all these different, and I guess too, it might be worth thinking like, do they, just because they're micromanaging and difficult, like, is there any truth or anything good that you can dig out of that? So, um, other people. So if we're talking about degrading behavior, that's a different story. So if they're saying stuff like, "Oh, your opinions are so cute. You're really smart for not going to college." Or, you know, I'm trying to think of some other examples I've heard. Some of them that have been intentional, some of them that have not been intentional, for more like, I don't know, just work environments. Well, here's an example for a guy. So in most of the fields I've worked in, there haven't been a lot of men. So, and if there's been a lot of women that might make a crack about, um, oh, well, he's not really a guy. He's one of us. He doesn't count. That kind of thing, which can be really hurtful and really minimizing. So, um, I think bringing that kind of stuff up is important. And that's difficult. I don't know. It depends kind of on their intention too. Like if they're trying to actually degrade you and you just get this comment like, "Oh, that's snarky." If they say, "Oh, you know what? I've noticed you've gained weight. Like it looks good on you." Just people can be so freaking catty. It's ridiculous. Just kind of thinking like, what would be the best way to kind of diffuse the situation? So You could do this in any number of ways. Like, I just wouldn't even let them ruffle you because they're trying to ruffle you. So you could just say something like, if somebody says, "Oh, I've noticed you've gained weight, and but no, I mean, really, it looks good on you." To just say something like, "Oh, how nice of you to notice." You just keep going. Like, you just don't let it ruffle you. Or if they say, same, like, "Oh, you know what? You're so smart for never having gone to college. I just would not have guessed." Just say you could just say something snarky like, "Well, but when I balance my checkbook, I got to take off my shoes because I need to count on my fingers and my toes." Just, to kind of reflect it back of like, "Hey, come on, like that's rude." Or you could just flat out say, "That's rude." You know? And then, there's just any number of ways you could handle it. It just depends on the person. And I think what you're comfortable with and kind of that vibe that you're getting, like, are they even aware that they're being rude, or do they think they're being funny, or are they intentionally trying to grind you down? That's a good one too. Truth Seeker says, yeah, she could say, "That's interesting. Why would you say that?" I like that. I like that phrasing. "That's interesting. Why would you say that?" That'll shut somebody down real quick if they're being passive aggressive. I think too, same if they're micromanaging. Yeah. I was at the tail end of my last job. I had a coworker, oh God, like this whole situation just was awful. And she was intentionally going through and finding every mistake pretty much I'd ever made. She was intentionally, I feel like she was trying to build a case to get me fired. And it was so incredibly stressful. And, like most situations like this, there's kernels of truth there. Like, there were mistakes I had made. It was giving me so much anxiety. And I would come home and oh God, poor Travis, and I'm crying and I'm just this like, total mess. My PTSD is off the chart. I'm like, you know, oh, it was so stressful. And um, then I guess I kind of made peace with realizing that I was probably going to quit. I was coming close to being like, I'm just going to quit my job. Like, I just, my time here is running short. I can't work like this. Like, this is way too stressful. And so one of the things I told her, I said, "You know what? Oh my goodness. Yes. I had to anticipate. This is because at first I was like, is this a fluke? Is she having a bad day? Like, am I reading the situation correctly?" I mean, it just went, she on Friday was totally fine. On Saturday, we'd gone out for brunch. I mentioned that I was writing a book and I had made a joke. We were talking about something and I said, "Oh, it wouldn't take me a whole lot to quit this job." And she just gave me this nasty look and said, "Oh, you really think that you'd make that much money, like off of your book?" And I was like, "Wait, what? No, I don't know. Probably not. But like, it wouldn't take a whole lot for me to quit my job. Like, I wouldn't need to make that much money to quit my job. I can cut expenses way down." And seriously, that Monday, she began making my life a living hell at work. It was crazy, freaking crazy. But it took me about a solid week to really come to terms with that's what was actually going on. And because I kept justifying it. I mean, it just was so wild. So I got to the point where, um, I was, and one day I was crying in my office and like the secretary we were on good terms came in and we were talking and I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. And I said, "This is what's going on." And like, "Is it me? Like, do you see this? Like, do you see that this is what's going on?" And she's like, "Yeah, girl, I get it. She's nuts. Like, I don't know what she's doing. And this is awful." And so once I got that validation that no, it wasn't just me and my PTSD, this was like a legitimate thing that was actually going on. I had told her, I said, um, I think if I'm making this many mistakes, this is a big deal. I think what she was doing was just kind of gathering them together and then was going to try to get me fired. I said, I went to go talk to my boss first and said, "I feel like this coworker is trying to get me fired." And I said, "She's going through everything I've ever done and finding mistakes and then bringing them to me like one after another. And it's like making me a nervous wreck." And my boss was fantastic. And she, and she was like, you know, you're in a union. Like basically you have to kill somebody in order to get fired from here. She's like, don't even worry about it. But it's still like, it's not a pleasant work environment. Anyway, so once I knew, because that was the fear of like, I'm going to get fired. Like I'm going to lose my job. And I talked to my boss about it and she's like, you know, don't even worry about it. Like we'll work with you. Then I realized, okay, I can come up with a plan. So then I thought, then I told my friend of me, I just call her Voldemort. Then I told Voldemort, you know, if I'm making all these mistakes, I think it would be really helpful for you to gather them all up. And then I think you need to take them to the boss. And then her and I can figure them all out. And that just kind of stunned her because it was sort of like, oh, wait a minute. No. You're supposed to walk on eggshells and try to please me and jump when I say jump and fix these mistakes. But then she very quickly was like, well, no, I really feel that we need to just handle stuff between us. And I was like, well, no, I think you should really take all of these to the boss. And you know what I mean? So if you're, I get the point is if you're being micromanaged like that by a coworker, is they're not your boss. Like you don't need to put up with that. So let your boss know what's going on and then tell them to go to your boss. Stuff like that. Duchess says, that's what I call my ex, Voldemort. Overcomer says, Dana, that woman was so jealous of you. Yeah, it was weird. It was the book. It was that tripped some sort of nerve in her. It was so wild that at the time I got out of there. We were having brunch. I left there. Like I wish I could have seen my face. I wish somebody else could have seen my face because it was just that like what kind of moment. I mean, she literally sneered at me. It was crazy. I get in my car and I texted another friend. I'm like, like this just happened. Like this, I've never had anybody look at me with like such disgust and contempt before. And like I thought it would blow over and it didn't. This went on for weeks at work before it was weird. I finally came in one day when I decided I'm turning my 2 weeks notice in. And such a freaking amazing feeling. Like went, to her office and to this other nurse's office and said, I just want you guys to know I've thought long and hard about this. And I'm turning in my 2 weeks notice. And her attitude towards me changed instantly. Then all of a sudden she was in this scramble because I was her only friend. Then she was in this scramble of, all of a sudden it went back to her being a decent coworker again. And, I mean, so many little things. Like we would walk out to our car together and we'd working together for years. We would walk out to our car together at the same time. But during those, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks that she was making my life a living hell, she would walk faster than me, but then like pretend like she wasn't. Do you know what I mean? Like just like little things like that. And so then I don't know, she just did a 180. It was great. It was great. It was great to be out of there. It was great to block her. It was great to be done with all of that. So Jennifer says, oh no, the feed is unavailable again. Yeah, try refreshing on YouTube. I don't know what's up. That's so weird. Yes, Shannon, I say the same thing. She says, she who must not be named. Yes. Like doing the whole pet name, I don't even know what you'd call it. Other name like that can really help to lighten a very tense situation like that. So I used to call it, like my coworker, I'd call her either Voldemort or obviously not to her face, but when she did that 180, it was to my other friends and to Travis, Voldemort or my frenemy. And then that's the frenemy thing. I'd been referring to her that way for a while because I was like, man, she really runs kind of hot and cold. And like, I don't know if it's like menopause or if like there's issues with me at work. I don't know. Freaking ridiculous. I'm so glad I'm not there. Done, done, done. Yeah, totally nuts. Nuts, nuts, nuts. All right, let's scroll up. Um, That's a great question, Jennifer. It says, how do you politely express disagreement? I have such a problem with this, and I would rather fake agree with people, which is probably on the same spectrum of lying. So I feel guilty either way. You know, being honest with other people it can be very difficult because there's a level of vulnerability there, right? Like, how is that going to be received if we're honest with them and we tell them how this is making us feel, or that we're not okay with something, or that we have concerns, or that we don't understand, or any that open, honest, sincere, solutions oriented communication. It's difficult. It's much easier to be passive aggressive or aggressive, or just passive. So it takes practice. And I mean, this is a skill that, I'm very much still working on. Like, it's an ongoing thing. So I think one of the ways that you can kind of work on that is, well, it's to practice first and foremost, but to try to anticipate. So role playing can really help. So you can get an empty chair, or you can have a friend that maybe you're comfortable with, and practice. So if you have a friend who's really good with being assertive, or a therapist, you be the difficult person, okay? The person that you disagree with, let's just say that. Maybe they're not difficult, maybe you just disagree with them. You be the person that you disagree with, and then they be you, okay? And so then you would say, like, okay, whatever that they would normally say, and then they'll kind of practice some ideas of what you could say back. It really does help. It helps to think this stuff through before we're in that situation. And you can do, like I said, you can do this to an empty chair as well. So, or even when you're driving, just thinking about what could you say. So, and again, it depends on the person too. Like, are they incredibly manipulative? Like, is having that open, honest, sincere, solutions oriented communication going to get you anywhere? Or is it going to get you further in the mud? Like, are they going to become more hostile and manipulative and just overall difficult? I think it's important to kind of um, understand the kind of person that we're dealing with. Like, if it's your boss or somebody that's an otherwise fairly solutions oriented person and you just disagree with them, you could phrase it some way like, um, you could say something like, well, here's a thought, dot, 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 or that's an interesting idea. I'm having trouble with kind of X, Y, and Z. Could you explain that more? And then try to get more clarity in what they're saying, and then say, uh, you know, well, would it be like, what would you think about, A, B, and C? And so then you bring up your idea, and then you're kind of opening up that discussion. Over time, when you start to feel like, okay, I am being heard, then kind of those conversations are still going to they can still be uncomfortable, but they can also just be so fantastic because then the air is getting cleared. So, um, if it's a person that you normally have a healthy relationship with, bringing up disagreements and that kind of stuff is important. And, I guess, could you give me an example of the person or of the relationship, and we could kind of go from there? Let's see. YH says, when will the curiosity end? When will I just not care to look up my ex on social media? It takes a while for our brain, I think, to kind of let go of that. But it helps to practice that skill as well. So practicing Whenever you feel the urge, it's sort of like if you were to rephrase the question with cigarettes instead. When will the craving end? When will I just not care about smoking? It's the same kind of like addictive compulsiveness that's there. Like it's just going to take a little while to break those bonds and then to do some rewiring to where you're doing something new. So it's hard to say, there's not a specific, date and time. Like it just kind of happens gradually. If and it really it is like kind of quitting any addiction. It's a lot easier to quit drinking, quit smoking, quit talking to your ex if you have something that you're replacing that bad habit with. So instead of, if you're going to quit smoking, take up knitting, something to do with your hands, or take up, painting, or chewing gum, having some sort of plan in place to help set you up for success. With drinking, if a person's like, okay, I'm going to quit drinking, and you see this at a lot of different like AA meetings, right? You've got people there that are just kind of dry drunks that still really crave alcohol, but that they, know that they can't drink, and that's really, I don't know. That's tragic, really, is what that is. But it helps if you're like, okay, I'm not going to just sit at home alone on the weekends and stay sober. I'm going to go stay sober and have fun, but I'm going to learn how to have fun in a different way. So what might that look like? Maybe you take up, I don't know, frisbee golf, or you get a dog and you go to the dog park, that kind of thing. Sort of like the universe doesn't like a void. It's going to be geared to fill up that void in your life with whatever. So the busier you can stay in something that feels good in a healthy way, the less that pull will be there. So with your ex, I would say, block them, make it difficult for yourself. Sort of like, like if you quit smoking, throw out your ashtrays, throw out your cigarettes, throw out your lighters, throw out the stuff around smoking. Set yourself up to succeed. With your ex, block them. Set up their emails to go directly to spam, block their text messages if you can, delete Facebook if you need to, and tell yourself, okay, this is just for the next 14 days. For the next 14 days, I'm going to be on, I don't know, YouTube only or whatever, and make that your new thing, or do like a 14-day yoga challenge, or something else to focus on. And the more time you have under your belt in a positive direction, the easier it becomes to not go look. And I think too, just reminding yourself, like, there's nothing good that's going to come from this. Like, all you will find is pain. Just get crystal clear about that. Like, you're not going to get the answers, the closure. There is just, it'd be more productive for you to go clean your toilet or to even step on a nail than it is to go look at their Facebook profile. It's just going to bring you pain. So you might be curious, and maybe you can tell yourself too, if you're curious, you want to go look, just be like, okay, well, so what? Just because you have that feeling doesn't mean you need to act on it. So you can just tell yourself, when that feeling arises of like, oh, I wonder what they're doing. I wonder what they're posting. Just, so what? Or that's interesting. Like, that's interesting. So what? Like, no, we're not doing that. We're going to do something different. C Polynesia says, Dana, I'm finding most of my friends growing up were all narcissists. I think that's very common, frankly. I think there tends to be kind of two main groups of people that get tangled up with narcissists. There's people that it really is a hit and run thing, that they've never had another relationship like this in their whole life, nothing even remotely close. And like, they're just absolutely blindsided by it. Like, that narcissist got into their life because they were vulnerable in some sort of way. Like, they were incredible. Maybe they were married for 40 years. Their spouse died. And now, they got tangled up with a sociopath. That's very common. So especially with online dating and that kind of stuff. So it might be like a fluke. I think for the vast majority of us, it tends to be it's that really painful relationship that brings us, to searching out these answers. And then once we start kind of getting these answers, it's like pulling a string on a sweater. And we start like, oh, wow, okay, yeah, all of these significant relationships in my life. And this is a good exercise if you haven't done this yet, is to go through and examine, the, I don't know, top 3 or top 5 most significant friendships in your life, and the relationships with your parents or with your siblings, and relationships with different significant, like top 5, maybe relationships with a significant other in your life. And are there repeating themes there? Like, are there repeating themes of kind of, real extreme behavior? And then examining, what was it? How did these relationships start off? Because if you can figure out kind of what that root cause is, like why were you attracted to them, then it's because it's not so much about like us attracting them. They're attracted to supply. So they're attracted to anybody that they can use. So it's not about us like never attracting them again. We probably will, because there's a lot of them out there. It's more about, are we getting them out of our lives once we spot that things are indeed problematic? So it's very eye-opening. It makes a person feel incredibly hypervigilant when they start realizing, yeah, actually, I think I've had quite a few of these people in my life before. So what's that about? Like, what kind of pattern am I running that maybe I'm not aware of? Because odds are there is one. So, and it's interesting once you can kind of, man, it'll set you free. It'll really upset you at first, but in time, it's a big missing piece of the puzzle to making your life work. It's huge. So I think, that's kind of that first big piece of the puzzle, is realizing, okay, is this a pattern that's been going on? And if so, why? Generally, it has to do with some sort of unmet need that, if it's gone unmet for any length of time, it turns into a vulnerability. For a lot of times, people, those vulnerabilities have to do with like emotional needs that maybe weren't met as in childhood. Maybe they were, they unloved, unwanted, ignored. They didn't have a sense of stability in their home. And when they got tangled up with this really charismatic person who was doing all of this love bombing and future faking and this intense soulmate kind of connection, it feels like you've met this perfect person. I mean, it feels like this is what this only happens in the movies, right? Like, it feels so over the top, because it is. But if you can figure out, because once you kind of, I don't know, fill those buckets within yourself, to where you're not, if you're walking around really lonely or feeling unloved or unimportant or whatever, you're going to be a prime target for love bombing, and you're going to just drink that up. So if that's the repeating theme, then now that you know that, you can start filling your own bucket and showing yourself, making yourself feel loved and important, and kind of meeting all of those needs that had gone unmet previously for whatever reason. And once those needs are met, that love bombing, you see it for what it is, and it loses its appeal real quick. You're like, this is some toxic garbage nonsense. This person's just trying to run game. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, you totally see it for what it is. And you're like, oh my God, this person's an idiot if they think I'm falling for this, but it just takes practice. You just see the world in a different way, I guess, so. But yeah, it's very eye-opening. Like I said before, people tend to feel hypervigilant when they start experiencing this. And it's in one of the live streams, we were talking about, a gal was saying that she was in therapy, and her therapist was saying, oh, you're just really hypervigilant right now. You're kind of thinking that everybody out there's potentially out to hurt you. And it's because you're feeling very dysregulated because of the trauma. And yes, that's part of it. However, the other part of it is there's a very real chance that you're just now seeing other people, their behavior clearly for the first time. And that's terrifying when you start to wake up to it. So it may not be just because of your PTSD and you feeling hypervigilant. It's like, oh my God, like I've been justifying all of this stuff for way too long. And when you do start seeing, the more you learn, I think, about problematic behavior, the easier it is to give a name to what you're seeing. So it's because then it's just not so nebulous anymore. It's weird. And then you can go back into different dynamics, like wherever, at work or with family or whatever. And you're like, you know what? I know exactly. I see this situation so stinking clear. Whereas before, if you don't have the words for it, it's so easy to get caught up in like, is it her? Is it me? I don't know. Is it my PTSD? And is it them? And am I being too sensitive? And I don't know. And like, you're just kind of like lost in the fog trying to figure it out. But knowing like, okay, I know what triangulation is. I know what love bombing is. I know what projection is. I know what, like gaslighting, like all of these different things. So then when you start experiencing it, you're like, no, I'm not crazy. Like this is actually what's going on here. You know? So, um, yes, long story short, painful realization when you realize that you've had lots of the wrong people in your life. My brother and I were actually talking about this earlier tonight. And what was he saying? Oh, we were talking about boundaries and just kind of struggling. I should do a live stream with him. He's a neat guy. He's just cool. He's a cool guy. But we were talking about boundaries and stuff and kind of, because we're so alike in so many ways, it's just weird. So, but he, like, as far as our thinking and stuff goes, and it's just, we have like this weird twin kind of connection, even though we're not twins. But it's like we'll think about things at the same time, and then he'll call me, and I'm like, God, that's so weird. But we were talking about boundaries and these kinds of things, and different people we've had in our life, and so I was explaining, I think one of the ways that both he and I'd really gone wrong over the years is that we were waiting for concrete proof. We felt mean. We felt mean cutting off friends that we'd known for any length of time, or we felt judgmental for, maybe the gal was saying earlier tonight, like this guy was kind of being weird, and maybe that was in the support group. Some guy was messaging her and she was getting a creeper vibe, but was supposed to meet him for a date. And it like, wait, why? Like if he's doing creepy things and he's being creepy, like you have enough information to not go meet with him. Right. But so many of us feel mean or judgmental about stuff like that. We think, oh, I need concrete proof before I can actually cut off this friendship or whatnot, this relationship. But oftentimes, if we're waiting around for basically a person to prove us right, then we're waiting too long. So, yeah, I guess anyway, the point being, it's worth examining kind of what are those repeating patterns with these different friendships, and why do you think that is? And what kind of need were they filling? What kind of vulnerability, I guess, were they exploiting? But also, what kind of need were they filling in your life? So once you kind of get those pieces of clarity, it can be a real game changer. Camilla. Oh, okay, Camilla. Says Dana, yes, my 4-year-old son has been hitting others at daycare. I've been coaching him to talk about his feelings and set boundaries and consequences, but he's getting worse. What do you think I should do? I would talk to the daycare provider and see if there's stuff going on at the daycare. If there's other kids that are hitting there, he's getting that from somewhere. So is he seeing other kids hitting other children? Is there stuff going on at the daycare? And kids tend to act out what they can't vocalize. So my guess is that there's more to the story. If you can encourage him to, use your words, that kind of thing. Can you have him draw pictures? Talk to him in terms of feelings. So if he starts hitting, saying, hey, you know what? We don't hit each other in this house. That's not what we do here. I don't hit you and I expect you to not hit me, and really kind of just lay it down. And so if he just gets pouty and upset, and then say, okay, why are you hitting? Why are you hitting? And say, can you draw me a picture of how do you feel inside? Why are you hitting? And maybe you could even kind of prompt him. Are you feeling frustrated? Are you feeling angry? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling, and then just kind of start talking about different emotions. And so and I guess also saying, is there a cause and effect? Is the hitting after he doesn't get his way? He wants ice cream for dinner. You guys are having, I don't know, pizza, and he's upset about that. Is he hitting out of frustration? Like, is there a cause and effect that you can kind of connect? Um, I don't know. I'm a big fan of just trying to be as straight up with kids as possible. It's amazing the stuff that they understand and that they can express if we can kind of help them, give them the words for that. So if he's upset, maybe even here's some thoughts. Asking, here's a game that we used to play. This is with teenagers, but this I think would work just fine with the 4-year-old. Probably the earlier you start this, the better. It's a game called a high and low. And to say, and make it a point to try to do this every day. What was the high point of your day today? And why? And what was the low point of your day today? And why? And if he has siblings, if there's other people in the house, doing this around the dinner table, or doing this on the drive home from daycare, or if there's other kids in the car, getting them engaged in this. Most kids especially like to share. They actually do, but they need prompting. And so if he's struggling with this, maybe you start, and talking obviously highs and lows in an age appropriate way that he can relate to. So maybe you're like, well, the high point of my day so far was this morning when the dog jumped in the bed and licked my face. That just made my day. Smiling about that all day long. The low point of my day was, after I got off work and my feet are really sore. And then seeing kind of what your child is going to say. So what was the high point of your day today? And if they just say, I don't know, you could say, well, that's okay. How about just guess? Like, if you had to guess, what would you say the high point of your day is today? And then if there's still there's that wall up, you could say maybe, and if like, for example, that they like coloring, or that they like nap time, or they don't like nap time, right? Like if they like coloring, saying, well, did you color today? Yeah. Okay. Well, would you say maybe that the coloring was the high point of your day? And he says, well, yeah. Well, yeah. Okay. Well, what did you color? And then the low point of your day, if your child doesn't like nap time, would maybe the nap be the low point of your day? You want to stay up and play, but it's time to take a nap, and then see what they say. And if they say no, and then I would kind of really leave that open-ended, like letting them fill in the blank of, and maybe even asking them, what are some other examples of what a low point of a day could be? Maybe if somebody was mean to us or hurt our feelings, or, start kind of just articulating these kinds of things. Like, I know sometimes like you don't like, or maybe like a high point, I know you really like bath time. Like, that's a high point of your day. But maybe the low time is when it's time to go to bed. So you're giving examples. That kind of opening that dialogue could potentially help. And maybe even straight out asking, like, if he's biting, where did you get this from? Like, did somebody bite you? Are you seeing other kids at daycare biting? You know, and seeing kind of what they have to say. Uh, yeah, a lot of times stuff can go on in daycare and it's really difficult for parents to know. But a big sign that there's something going on is when there's behavior changes within children at any age. It's so easy to justify and be like, oh, they're terrible twos, or, oh, they just started school, or to kind of just gloss over it. But that there can be more going on there. So I would try to get to the bottom of it. Uh, and, you know, if you get color, like I said, coloring, draw me a picture. Uh, if your, child's 4 years old, asking them what does, do you know what the word frustration means? Like, what face do you make? Or maybe ask, what face does mommy make when she's frustrated? How does mommy act when she's frustrated? you know, and then, or how does mommy look when she's mad? And just kind of role modeling those different emotions. And this is how my face looks. Like when I'm sad, this is how my face looks. When I'm mad, this is how I look. When I'm happy, I make this space. And then listing, these are some things that make me happy. I swear, most of the time, kids, when you start making these conversations okay to talk about what's going on, they tend to just run with it. And it's amazing the stuff that they start talking about. So, okay. Let's see. Dawn says, I just stuffed my feelings down as a kid. Yeah, I think a lot of people do. It's interesting. There's kind of these topics for discussion that most families don't have, religion, politics, and feelings and money. I'd say pretty much like the major things in life people really don't talk about. And, these are really important conversations. And we can start these conversations at a very young, age appropriate way. So, okay, let me scroll up here. Overcomer says, Dana, is it hoovering even if the ex doesn't directly contact me, but is hanging out with my crowd and doing things he never did? I've missed certain events and found out he was there and has taken pictures. Mm, I don't. I guess any type of even like remote contact from a narcissist is a potential hoover. So I would treat it as such. And what I mean by that is just kind of emotionally prepare yourself for potential interaction with them, you know, that they might surface at one of these events, or that you might see the stuff on Facebook. It's not a coincidence, obviously, that they're doing it to get you, right? Like to get under your skin or to reopen contact. So you really might have to kind of find a different group of friends in the meantime, and just do totally different activities, and um, try to act like it doesn't bother you. And that's going to be really, really difficult. But it's, it's oftentimes necessary. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Jennifer says, yeah, my dad always said to never talk about religion, children, or money at a party. He's a narcissist, but he did have some good advice at times. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a time and place for these kinds of conversations, but they definitely are inflammatory. So it's kind of, I think, knowing when to talk about them, and stuff like that. I think with kids, it's important. I mean, my goodness, it's just amazing. Like, it's amazing that our lives even work at all. Like, we just don't, the stuff is not taught. and it's barely taught in schools. It's just so freaking frustrating. It's like, like why is the War of 1812 discussed when kids aren't learning about their credit report? It's just, to me, it's just insane. Like, oh, it's important that we talk about these life skills, about teaching children, like, about their emotions, and that your emotions are a sign. They're a big part of kind of your internal guidance, and that they're there for a reason. Like, they have a message for you. Doesn't mean that we have to always act on our emotions, but it's important that we understand the messages that they have for us, and understanding kind of your own body awareness, and that you have the right, like, you don't need to go, you know you don't have to have people touch you if you don't like it, and this is your body and this is your space. And that's important. And teaching self-esteem, and teaching just kind of basic money management and that kind of stuff. And I don't know, it's just so we just do things so backwards, especially here in the United States with stuff like that. Okay, let's see. They took our jobs, says, has anyone been coming out of one of these relationships, started waking up and realizing that you have more than one narcissist around you, and that just about everybody you know is pushing over your boundaries? Yeah. Yeah. Maria brought up a really great point. I think it was last week, and it was um, about really kind of learning to be assertive. And I think this, and definitely that's important, 100%. There's just kind of these waves of awareness with all of this. And that's definitely the first major wave of, oh my goodness, there's been a lot of people in my life that have been incredibly problematic. And then we have to kind of get used to having deal breakers, and being like, and tuning into our intuition, and realizing if something feels off, it's because something's off. And that realizing that, hey, you don't need to wait until they destroy your life in order to leave them. Like, you can leave a lot sooner. Doesn't mean that you're a bad person. Doesn't mean that you're not compassionate. Doesn't mean that you're a bad Christian, or that you don't believe in, whatever. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means that you have a healthy boundary, and that you're not going to let somebody else destroy you. So that's kind of all goes with that first wave of awareness. And then I would say probably the second wave has to do with really working on your deal breakers. And so then people start becoming more in tune with their intuition, and they start practicing that skill of walking away. And that takes a while. I mean, that's, trial and error. It's a new skill. And then I should really try to map all of this out, because I think tends to be a very predictable pattern that most people, a course that most people tend to run when they wake up from stuff like this. So you're definitely not alone. Uh, and it's so cool with the internet, because you can, I think for the first time in history, you can look back, and right away you've got, oh my goodness, like, here's 50,000 people that are pretty much all going through the same thing. And like, you just you start seeing patterns of the questions people ask, and the way that they handle situations, and kind of where they get hung up on different things. And um, yeah, it's a common thing. So anyways, I think the second wave is like deal breakers and understanding that. And then I would say the third wave is um, practicing setting boundaries, or maybe even like boundary awareness, and and just practicing that. And then with that kind of tends to go like that, being assertive. And it's uncomfortable. And I guess just the whole practicing, like, being comfortable with getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, because having these, being that, like we were just talking about, having that open, honest, sincere, solutions oriented communication can be very uncomfortable at first. It's uncomfortable because it requires vulnerability, and it's uncomfortable because it's sort of like you gotta pull the splinter out before it's going to heal. And so if there's this elephant in the room, or there's this thing that's going on that's causing you stress and tension, like, you got to deal with, you've just got to pull that splinter out before it's going to start to heal. But if you're with the right people, that are also solutions oriented, then these conversations can really bring people closer together. It's just, man, I tell you, it's so incredibly refreshing when you can find people that you can communicate effectively with, because then they know. Then there, it's just, oh my God, like it's just none of the stuff that was there in other relationships, like the silent treatment and the passive aggressiveness and or the aggressiveness or the passiveness. Like there's no wondering, there's no crazy making, there's none of that. Like they can bring something up to you, like you're able to handle it appropriately, you're able to bring stuff up with them, they're able to handle it appropriately. Like it's a mature, healthy relationship, and things get resolved and things move forward, you know. And it's just it that's how people become, grow closer together over time. So yeah, Nikki says, I'm never ignoring my intuition again. Looking back, it was always right. Yes. Yes, 100%. Yeah, our intuition, our brain, it picks up so much information. I forget just how much. It's like millions of bits of data a second. It's way much more than our logical and critical thinking, like our prefrontal cortex, that logical and critical thinking part of our brain. It picks that part can only process, and I forget what it is, like so many bits per second of data, which is weird. It's like a computer. But our like reptilian brain is picking up pretty much everything, and then it's filtering it through like a wide variety of, the brain is so interesting, like it filters all its information through this wide variety of filters. It filters it through our previous events, our the beliefs that we currently hold, kind of unspoken or like subconscious expectations that we might have, or standards that we might have, or just, I mean, so many filters based on like our nationality or age or gender or sexual orientation, our experiences, like I said, previous experiences, religion, education. So many filters are in place that we're not even aware of. So by the time all of that information then filters, like bubbles up to our logical and critical thinking brain, and this happens actually pretty quickly. But when that deeper part of us senses that something's off, it's because it's picked up information that's telling us that something's off, but that information doesn't make logical sense to us. Doesn't make logical sense to our logic and critical thinking part of our brain. So because it doesn't compute, because we really have three brains, we don't have just one. We have that reptilian brain, we have the limbic system or the mammalian brain, and then we have that prefrontal cortex. So by the time that information gets from that reptile brain up to your prefrontal cortex part of your brain, there's a lot of stuff that's already been filtered out without us even knowing. So if something's not computing, but everything in your like body is telling you, ooh, no. And those deeper parts of our brain communicate with us in different ways. So it's interesting because we're not taught about this. And so it's really easy to brush it off and to think, no. I think especially for men, I need facts. I need facts in order to make a logical decision about this information. But the thing is, our brain doesn't work that way. Like more often than not, we get these deeper sensations, like that reptile part of our brain, which is the fight or flight. It's that, people talk about that in terms of more of like like literally a visceral reaction. Um, they physically don't feel good. It's that physical sensation of fear, um, adrenaline. It's very, very primitive type. Your heart starts racing. You don't know why. That's why. The limbic system, that more mammalian part of your brain, is it sends off like different emotions. So it's feeling uncomfortable, uneasy, uncertain, um, which progresses like into introspection, these kinds of things. So, but like I said, if your brain is looking for that one concrete piece of proof, but it can't find it, then it's easy for us to gloss it over because we're looking for that concrete piece of proof. But what we're experiencing doesn't lend itself to having a concrete piece of proof. So our brain thinks, oh, this must be irrelevant because we can't find that concrete piece of proof. But it's just, I guess, so it's a part of it's understanding that intuition is a very powerful thing. It's not woo woo. It's very science based, and it's a very big part of how our brain works. And it's important that we honor that because it's picking up on information that's there that our prefrontal cortex just can't access for whatever reason. Okay. Missouri Cowboy says, he says, yes, I want and need logic. What is with all this other stuff? The other parts of my brain. What are my other parts of my brain doing? Yeah, I get it. I totally get it. But it's interesting. I mean, you think about animals have this stuff down. I don't know. I swear our prefrontal cortex is a it's it's really, I guess it's like the rationalizing. We say it's the rational part of our brain, but really it's the rationalizing part of our brain. So I think when you can kind of look at it that way, like it thinks it's so smart, like it thinks it understands so many things. And, sometimes it's a crapshoot. Like sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. But I think it's important that we also, oh God, that scared me, realize that our other parts of our brain are picking up on stuff and it's just as valid. It just communicates with us in a different way. But yeah, I get it. I think a lot of people struggle with that. Um, right. James says, yeah, this is interesting. It makes sense. It's like everything in your being says that it's off, but your brain is like, no, that's silly. Yeah. And so what I was saying earlier before, here's where it also gets interesting is um, when you have something that's more concrete to hang on to, when you have the vocabulary for understanding problematic behavior, triangulation, gaslighting, projection, pot stirring, crazy making, stonewalling, all of this terminology, when you start understanding like manipulative behavior and kind of how this goes down, what's love bombing, this kind of stuff, when you start to experience it, you now have the vocabulary for it, and now you are able to more clearly articulate to yourself why you feel off. It's not this giant mystery anymore. And it's so weird because once you start having these aha moments, uh, you just don't get caught up in it because I think people tend to get caught up in going back time and time again because they're not in large part aware of what's really going on, right? And so they continue to doubt themselves, and for like any number of reasons they doubt themselves. The narcissist tells them they're crazy, that they're to blame, um, you know whatnot, and then it's just manipulation to the nth degree. So it's interesting. And I think you could probably see that it's so much easier to see anything in other people, right? But like when new people come onto the chat and they have questions and you can see that stuff so clearly. People are like, hey, I just met this new person, and they told me I haven't met them yet. We've only been talking a little bit on the phone. They told me that they loved me and that they have always wanted to marry somebody like me. And they, like, and you see it, you're like, this is pretty classic love bombing. Like, this is ridiculous. And you're able to articulate why. Like, you're able to break this down. It's like it's understanding the trick that the magician's doing. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And then it doesn't become so like woo woo. Oh, it's just my intuition. You're like, no, psh, boom. Like, this is why this is a problem. And you just, there's no more confusion. You see it clearly, but it takes a little while to get there. Yeah. And Dawn says, yes, animals are good judges of character. I take my animals' judgment and intuition literally. Yeah. Yep. 100%. And human beings, we are animals. And um, I know we don't often think of ourselves like that, but, we're all just kind of, good looking monkeys, really is what it is. Like, we're not that far away from from like peeling bananas. Like that's just wasn't that long ago in terms of evolution. And so it's important, I think, to realize animals have instincts, people do too. And could you imagine how, I mean, like think about how lost an animal would be if they didn't have their intuition. And every animal senses things in their environment differently. Birds can tell when a storm is coming. You always know, like, you need to start driving or start climbing to high ground when you see when everything gets really calm or when birds start flying. There's one I think it's one of like the earliest signs of like tsunami is animals get really weird, which makes sense because they can sense these things. Human beings can sense things too. It's just we're not our, logic and logic and critical thinking part of our brain. We've gotten to the point where we're like, okay, no, we need to use this new part of our brain, which is fantastic. Don't get me wrong. But we've kind of in the process lost the ability to honor the deeper parts of our brain. Like they're there. It's like no wonder like no wonder we're all so lost and screwed up and trying to navigate our environment. It's just we're missing a big chunk of like how to process information. And that just comes from these more primitive parts of our brain. It's just so wild. But the cool thing is your intuition is always there. It never leaves you. Your instincts are always there. They never leave you. It takes a bit to get in tune with them, especially if you've undergone a lot of psychological abuse and gaslighting and manipulation, and you don't trust yourself and you don't trust your perception of events. Like it takes a bit to get back to the place where you can trust your perception of events and how to keep yourself safe and how to navigate your environment. But it's possible, I guess is what I'm saying. So, but I think it really starts with just turning inward. We live in this crazy society where it's this quick fix society. And that's even worse, right? Because then people really aren't learning to listen to the messages that your body's trying to send you. It's amazing. Like, could you imagine? We would never treat an animal like that. If a horse had, I don't know, was limping, we wouldn't just give it a pain pill. Like we would try to figure out, okay, well, what's wrong? Why is it limping? Is it the horse shoes? Does the horse need to lose weight? Is there something wrong with its diet? Is it not getting enough? Is it getting too much exercise? Is it not getting enough exercise? Does it have a bone spur? Does it have a broken leg? Like we would start trying to troubleshoot what are the reasons as to why this horse has a limp. Or even behaviorally with animals. Why does like the dog whisperer, that show is a great example. Why here's this animal who's like tearing up couch pillows and, peeing all over the house and doing all these things. And the dog whisperer comes in and he says, and I love it. He's like, I rehabilitate dogs. I train owners. And it's getting in tune with like, what does this dog need? Why is it acting the way that it's acting? Let's fix the environment and then see if the dog adjusts to that. And people are the same way. Like we're so quick to be like, oh man, I'm so depressed or I'm so anxious. And all of that comes out in so many different ways. But until we can really address, instead of just being like, I have an anxiety disorder, I'm just depressed. And I don't mean to make light of that. Like I've suffered with severe depression on and off pretty much my whole life, but to look at it as a whole, like look at the environment. Is there what's going on there? Because there's those intense, uncomfortable emotions, especially, are really great signs that things need to be something, probably multiple things need to get into adjustment. So, yeah. Priscilla, oh gosh, says the horse limps because it's subconsciously he's a pimp. Maybe he just has swagger. Is that what you're saying? Stable swagger? Maybe. We can file that in the maybe pile for now. I think there might be other reasons for it. And that's a really great point too. Missouri Cowboy says, yes, if the dog adjusts. That is the key. Temperament is genetic. Some dogs, just like some people, you cannot change genetics. You cannot make a beagle hunt like a terrier. Yeah. Well, I think in some, right, like some animals can be rehabilitated and some can't, unfortunately, for whatever reason. And it's just like people. Like we don't, it just behavior is kind of this giant mystery still. But I like what you talked about as far as genetics. It's interesting because yeah, dogs, certain dogs have certain traits, and man, they are really good at that. And like you said, trying to get a beagle, you can't turn a beagle into a terrier, just like you can't turn a terrier into a beagle. They are what they are, and it's kind of the same thing with people too. Like if a person's introverted, they're not going to magically become extroverted just because we want them to be extroverted, or vice versa. Or if a person is an artist and we really, their father really wants them to become an accountant, like that's not going to work either. Some people just kind of have this natural bend. And I think most of us do certain areas that it's just, you find your flow and like you're really good at it. And I think it's just knowing yourself well enough. Um, and to follow that path. It's not easy. And if you grew up in a whole household of, um, I don't know, doctors, and your thing is you absolutely love cars and you want to become a mechanic, that might be really taboo. Same thing. You might grow up in a whole house full of mechanics and you want to become a doctor, and that's taboo, you know? So it's just figuring out kind of who you are in this life, and living a life of purpose on purpose, regardless of what other people around you are going to say. And that's, easier said than done. Okay. Oh, I love that, Maria. That's a great way to say that. She says, I now say to myself, a part of the other person's job is to create and maintain a safe feeling and space for me. If that doesn't exist from the beginning and stay, I leave easily now. Yes. I think absolutely. I love the way that you said that. I think that's so huge. That yes, that level of emotional safety with another person is it's everything, It's so difficult, not even difficult, it's impossible, I think, to have any relationship with any type of depth with a person that you don't feel emotionally safe with. And we see this in the chat and in the support group all the time. People get upset with themselves. They're like, what's wrong with me? I don't trust, or I'm having trouble trusting them. They've been sober. They've been sober for a month now. When is it okay for me to trust them again? Or yeah, it's like if there's no emotional safety there, if there's not that track record of that open, honest, sincere, solutions oriented communication, and like Maria's saying, that emotional trust of, yes, we can talk about things. I can provide the safe space. There's kind of these understood ground rules, right? Like it's, what were we talking about before in another live stream? It's okay for a person to get frustrated and angry, but it's not okay for them to become abusive. And it's not okay for them really even to become loud. Like that's really intimidating. So just being like, okay, like this is how, if you're frustrated, let me know, like, let's talk about it. Or just, yeah, like just everything, just the way you said it, Maria, just holding space for that other person, and then having them reciprocate that is just, it's everything. It's everything. Gigi says, I was trained to doubt myself. I was convinced I was crazy. I even took medication and visited therapists to quote unquote fix me. My CBT therapist taught me to mistrust my perception. She aided in my abuse. And I think, unfortunately, that does tend to happen often. If you have a therapist who's unfamiliar with kind of the more, especially the more subtle signs of abuse, or if they're operating from their own limited understandings of, um, what, like, who can be abusive, or if a therapist is thinking, oh well, every mother loves their child, or they really want what's best for you, they're your parents, these kind of like limiting beliefs, they're just not going to see it, because all of this information for them that's coming in is getting filtered through their beliefs, and so it's just, they're not seeing it. So yeah, that's what tends to happen. Cognitive behavioral therapy is fantastic, but if a person doesn't have an accurate assessment of what's actually going on, then it can become incredibly dangerous, and it can become really inadvertently gaslighting the person on the receiving end of it. Because if you're continually telling somebody, okay, we need to basically reframe how you're thinking about this, and making it into the positive, and restructuring events, then yeah, it can really set a person back in their healing and in their understanding. So I don't blame you for being upset with that. It's it's beyond frustrating and enraging, really. When the narc bark says, my parents are trying to quote unquote help me. Narcissistic and codependent parents can be really dangerous. The ones that really don't have any intention, they don't really have any intentions to genuinely help you. I just get such a bad intuition from my dad. Things like that, because you're right. I think a lot of times if you've got a narcissistic parent, they're going to potentially try to really control, undermine, sabotage, um, manipulate, do all kinds of things. If you have a codependent parent, they might not want you to ever really grow up, and they might want to just take care of everything for you. They don't really know how to maybe relate without being needed. And so yeah, it can really kind of stunt a child's development, because then the child never learns to really become an adult. So, with getting a bank account, with getting a credit card, these kinds of things, kind of shutting that down with them and saying, and I don't know the dynamic really, like, of your family, but certain phrases. Uh, well, here's something that I did in my own family. Is I got to the point where I quit telling people what I was doing, because they kept trying to talk me out of every single thing, and then it would make me doubt myself big time. So I got to the point where I was like, I would just go do something. I would go open an account. I would go buy a car. I would go, um, start a different job or whatever. And then I would inform them of what happened, realizing full well, like, I was going to hear all of the reasons as to why that was a terrible idea. And so I had to get okay with, like, the consequences of my act. I mean, they weren't like reckless actions, being an adult, but like letting them know, yeah, okay, you know what? I decided that I'm whatever, going to go to nursing school, or that I'm going to, move to Michigan or whatnot. And then if they wanted to tell me how terrible that was, I would just gently kind of remind them, like, or I would say ahead of time, I have something to tell you. I don't really want to discuss it or argue about it. I'm just letting you know. So kind of phrasing it in a way that they know what to do with the information. Like, I'm just informing you, I'm going to be moving to Michigan, May 15th. And this is kind of my plan. I just wanted to let you know. So, and then just change the subject, depending on how much you even really want to tell them. But if they continue doing stuff, Um, you could say certain things like, that's an interesting thought, or that's something that I'll keep in mind. And then just kind of reiterating, well, I feel like it's time for me to open up a checking and savings account. I appreciate your concern, but I really need to do this. Like, it's time I really learn how to become independent and how to begin to learn how to handle my own finances. And if they start, getting upset about it again, just say, you know what, I'm going to be fine. Like, I will figure this out. Like, and you can always change the subject, and you can always tell them, I don't want to argue with you guys about this. It's time for me to grow up, and just try to nip it in the bud. But you don't have to stand there and defend every single thing that you do. So, and it just, it depends on the relationship you have with your parents. So, and how you kind of phrase things. So, saying things like, I love you so much, but here's what I'm going to do. Or, I really don't want to, I just wanted to let you, I have something to tell you, you know, uh, like, I really don't want to argue about it, or whatnot. However you want to phrase it, I value your opinion if you do, or if you don't, I would leave that out. But here's kind of what's going on, and this is why I'm doing it. And then just kind of leave it. Okay. Maria says, Dana, that's a great example. Learning to inform people versus asking for permission. Yeah, we have to learn. We don't need to ask for permission to live our lives fully and differently to others. There's just no debate. Yeah. And you know what I found? Because I have quite a few like micromanaging people in my life, but I will say their intentions, I think the micromanaging stems more from anxiety than like a power and control thing, but it's still draining and crazy making. But I think it's well intended. It's just, but it's their issue. But I don't want it trickling over on me. I have found that it really does help realizing that they are anxious for me. It's just all of this fear-based stuff within them of change, of doing something new, and really kind of phrasing it in that way of, you know, um, I just wanted to let you know, or I have something to tell you. Like, you don't need to fix it. You don't need to do anything. I have a plan. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to figure this out. I appreciate your concern. They start kind of wanting to troubleshoot stuff. I think a lot of parents tend to kind of fall into that. Just say like, this is the plan, and, you know, I'm good. Like, I'm good. Okay. Mm. That's a nice way to end that, Maria. She says, yes. She says, yes, Dana, I have the same. I now say, I understand your anxiety and fear for me. Thank you for your concern. I would love your positivity and support. Thanks. I like that, because then it kind of gives them something to do. I think with people that have that micromanaging and it's anxiety, they don't know how to channel that. And so if you can say something like, here's what I need from you. If you could give me like your positivity and support, then it gives them something to do kind of with that anxious energy, because they just might not know what to do with it. And I like that. And I think that's one of those phrases too, Maria, the way that you said that a person can hold on to that and kind of do the broken record thing. So if they circle around again and they're like, well, okay, but have you thought about this, and have you thought about that, and did you do this? Yeah, boy, you know what? You've really thought this through. And I really appreciate all of your concerns and I hear you. And I've got this figured out and, just being positive and being a good support is so important to me. Thank you. And then I think it's okay. You don't need to just, we don't need to just stand there like and continue to have this argument or debate. Like then at some point we just need to either change the topic or we just need to leave, kind of a thing. Yeah. Maria says, yeah, she's found the broken record technique works brilliantly. Yes. Yeah, I agree. I think that does as well. When the narc barks is talking about her parents and she says, right now, when I say to my parents, I'm good, they say, you act like you know things, and then they make me feel guilty and act like they know best. But, I think it's important for you to realize that growing up is hard. And like I said, most of us kind of start off as an adult, we don't know. Like nobody knows what they're doing. They really don't. I mean, there's like 1% of the population that I feel is actually equipped to be an adult by the time they're 18. And so for the rest of us, it's a school of hard knocks. Like it's figuring stuff out. It's getting, misusing credit cards. It's, you know, un- getting bounced checks and we tend to learn the hard way with a lot of things. And so I just want you to know, like, as you go through that, because you're not going to do everything perfectly, you know? So it's going to be trial and error. The whole goal, I think, is to try to limit that learning curve to where it's as least painful as possible. So ideally if you have other people in your life that you can talk to and that you can kind of get input on, and ideally people that are getting the kind of results that you want, I think that's very critical. So if, as far as like, setting up credit and banking and, moving into your own apartment, you don't want to ask like your deadbeat Uncle Sal, who's, 65 years old and living in his mom's basement. Like, you don't want to ask him about that. You want to go find a friend who has an apartment, who has managed to grow her credit or his credit or whatever, and has a bank account and is living more independently. And then kind of saying, okay, well, what did they do? And then kind of talking about that. So it's a learning curve to it. But you got to learn sometime. I mean, that's the thing. Like, there's no shortcut. Like, yeah, so what? You don't have it all figured out. Like I said, most people don't. Most people don't even start having it figured out till they're 40, frankly. So, you know, but you got to have it figured out because your parents aren't going to be around forever. So their whole premise of like, well, we're just going to handle everything because you don't know what you're doing is kind of a flawed premise to begin with. And that's just postponing, your learning curve. Because then what happens? What happens when they go into a nursing home or they die or, you know what I mean? Like, then what? Like, there's no shortcut around learning this stuff. And that's very true. Overcomer says Dana, and some people never figure it out. We're the lucky ones. That is so true. I have my mom's good friend, married young, was married for a long time to a very narcissist, very controlling guy. He had a whole double life. I think he actually had two double lives going on. He had multiple children by multiple women that she didn't even know about until she finally couldn't handle it anymore and filed divorce over his alcoholism. And that's when it came out that he'd been paying child support and I guess like spousal support to these other women that I can't even imagine. Like, what a shock. But anyways, so here she is, and I think it was in her 60s, and didn't know how to cook, didn't know how to do her taxes, didn't know how to balance her checkbook, didn't know, I mean, just didn't know a lot of stuff that most people know by that age. And that must have been incredibly scary and overwhelming to be forced to learn all of that in your 60s. So yeah, but I get, and I can't reiterate this enough. I think it's so important that I realize, you're gonna make mistakes, and it's gonna be okay. So nobody starts off at the finish line. It's just this stuff takes practice. It's trial and error. It's kind of developing that attitude of curiosity of, okay, what went wrong? Like, what didn't work here? How come I bounced that check? Like, what piece of the puzzle am I missing? You know? And if you can kind of figure out what happened that led to this outcome, then you can do better next time. It's just kind of continually adjusting your and everybody's got a different strategy when it comes to handling money and how they pay their bills and all of it. It's just going to be kind of figuring out the basics, but then figuring out what works best for you and in your life. Um, Interesting. Elizabeth says, Dana, would you say that most narcissists will leave if we have strong boundaries? And people who are not abusive are okay with our boundaries? Oh, are people that are not abusive okay with our boundaries? I feel like my ex had the patience to erode them. Okay, that's a great question. Let me start with the first part of that. Would you say that most narcissists will leave if we have strong boundaries? Yes. However, comma, if we have strong boundaries, we're not going to put up with it. So they might not leave, but we for damn sure won't stay. The second part of that is people who are not abusive. If people who are not abusive, will they be okay with our boundaries? Mm, that's a very kind of broad question that I think is a very valid one. That kind of goes back to kind of what I was talking about earlier. That's more of that black or white thinking. Like narcissists are not okay with boundaries, but normal people would be. So just because a person isn't abusive doesn't mean that they respect healthy boundaries. So, um, abusive people don't respect boundaries. It's all about them all the time. So that's right there. You can kind of know, okay, that's just not going to work, and you'll find out pretty early on. Like you assert yourself, they just steamroll over that, and when you get to the point where you have healthy boundaries, you don't put up with that. Like that little game might happen once or twice because you might be doubting yourself, but you're pretty quickly realizing like this isn't going to work. Uh, so, like I said, not all abusive or non-abusive people. We'll just call them normal people. Not all normal people are going to know how to have healthy boundaries, but more often than not, they'll respect them. So it's, I guess, maybe let me take that back. It's more important to find people that just respect your boundaries. like, uh, if that makes sense. So, and then you said your ex had the patience to erode your boundaries. When you get to the place where you have strong boundaries, and unfortunately, I think it's one of those things like we don't know how strong our boundaries are until they've really been pushed. And oftentimes when they've really been pushed to that extent, they're eroded. Like it's really difficult, I think, to teach this stuff or to even instill it in children, even at a young age. It's it's so situational. When people have that emotional investment in another person, it's one of the strongest bonds that we can have with another person. And it, no matter how much we understand this stuff, like love really can be blind and it can make us make terrible decisions. And so, um, I think it just tends to, we have to kind of practice those boundaries. We have to understand them. And oftentimes it takes getting tangled up with a person like this, maybe even a few times, to really understand boundaries and our boundaries and our mindset and um, all of that. Because if we don't have and I just again, like I just really don't think that most people have a healthy understanding of like when it's okay to walk away from somebody or how to be assertive or what I mean, my goodness, I've heard such stuff. Like it just is uh geez. People are like, okay, commitments forever. Like, or they might say commitments forever unless there's abuse. But we're going to work any addiction, any adultery, any other situation. I will hang on there until I can't hang on anymore. And that's a problem. That's a sign of poor boundaries. So there's a lot of really faulty thinking that's floating around out there. And we can't, I guess what I'm getting at is we can't have healthy boundaries if we have faulty thinking. So we really need to start with that, start with our understanding of who's responsible for what, like kind of getting the house in order, getting the basics in our mind in order. The, you know, that we are responsible for ourselves. Other people are responsible for them, especially if they're over the age of 18, that they're an adult. Things get really muddy and really confused and drama when we start thinking that we're responsible for them and that they're responsible for us, and that it just things get tangled up and meshed and just all kinds of craziness. So getting our thinking straight will result in getting our boundaries straight, because our boundaries are kind of the bodyguard of our standards, and our standards kind of stem from our thinking. So if that makes sense, I will say it's difficult. It's difficult when we're fairly fresh out of a situation to think that the situation could have gone down any other way than it did. I feel like that tends to take a person a little while to be out of a situation, to realize, because it feels like a hit and run. It's like it's like you wake up one day and you're like, how did I get in a cult? Or how did I get tangled up with this crazy person? Like, I don't even know how I got here. I feel like they really eroded them. But like we were saying earlier, with your intuition and that feeling that something's off, the more you familiarize yourself with like different types of abuse and different types of manipulation and how all of this stuff goes down, the less nebulous it's going to seem. You're going to have so much more clarity if you're in a similar situation and your boundaries are being pushed, and you have this understanding of the different terminology and you're more in tune with your feelings. Your boundaries aren't going to get eroded like that, because you're going to have that clarity much sooner. So I hope that makes sense. Um, Abuse Free says, do narcissists have strong boundaries for themselves, but not for their target? My ex was like that, so I'm wondering if they are all like that. Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it's the kind of a hasty generalization to say that everybody, all X are like Y kind of a thing. Like all narcissists are like ... But I would say by and large, they have I wouldn't even say it's boundaries. It's very strong expectations. It's all in their mind. It's all about them all the time. They feel completely entitled and justified to get their way by any means necessary. And so it's their thinking, their mindset is, hey, it's all about me all of the time, even if it's at the expense of you, because if it is at the expense of you, you deserve it, because it should be all about me all of the time. So that's that thinking that's driving their behavior. So like I was just saying, their boundaries are an extension of their mindset. So, and I wouldn't even I don't even say if it's boundaries. It's more of just behavior. Because they don't have they just steamroll over other people. It's just all about them all the time. So as far as like what they tend to not put up with stuff from other people. at all because they feel that they shouldn't ever have to work as a team or compromise or listen to another person. It's all about them all the time. They're right all the time, kind of a thing. Even when they're wrong, they're right. Like it's just exhausting, you know? So uh they so if they had a target that stood up for them and said, "Hey, excuse me, like you don't talk to me like that," you know, or kind of nipped that in the bud early on, they would continue to either try to manipulate more or well, I mean, I really think they would try to manipulate more. They might use pity. I'm so sorry. I grew up in a really awful childhood and I just don't know like how to interact and can you give me another chance, please? Or they would amp it up even more and become even more aggressive. So it just depends like if that target has but the thing is if that target has strong boundaries, if that narcissist came back, especially if that narcissist came back with more aggression, because it's a lot that's more overt, like it's easier to see that, then a person with strong boundaries would be out the door. Like, dude, not looking for a project, looking for a partner. Like you've got wait, this is not workable. It's harder, I think, to see that more covert stuff like the pity and the sympathy and stuff. But even still, a person with healthy boundaries, like they're gonna see that this isn't healthy communication. Like they're going to sense that when that kind of stuff rears its head. But yeah, if you're in a relationship with a narcissist and you start trying to set boundaries, they tend to want to leave the relationship because then they feel like you're trying to be controlling and manipulative and difficult. How dare you prevent them from getting their way? It's just the mindset. Like it should be all about them all the time. So, okay. Oh, yeah, what was that from? That was so good. That was from a book. AB. Oh, Maria, thank you for saying that. You read my mind. Said yes, the zipper analogy from the book The Betrayal Bonds. And the concept was having the zipper on the inside versus the zipper on the outside. Yes. And so healthy boundaries have the zipper of control on the inside. We're in the control. We set the pace. Poor boundaries or weak boundaries have the zipper on the outside where other people decide, they set the pace, they decide everything, how much we share, if they can touch us, if they can, how they can talk to us, how they can treat us. They set the pace. And then we're just kind of at the mercy of however much they're going to zip or unzip. That's a yes. I forgot all about that. I loved that concept. Yes. Huge, huge when we turn that zipper inside and we stay in control. And like I said again, once you start seeing this stuff for what it is, it doesn't. You're going to be able to act much quicker because you've been down this road before. It's like that gal told me about when I was going back and forth with stuff. A handful of years ago. She's like, Dana, you've seen this movie before. Like, you don't need to wait until the very end to get up and leave. And she was right. I'm like, oh my God, you're absolutely right. And it's the same thing with the stuff that you guys are going through. If it feels off and you try to address it and there's no resolution or things get even crazier, you've been down this road before. So, the big key I think is to figure out, okay, what pattern is going on in my brain that I keep going down the same road? Maybe like a different guy or a different girl, or I guess same guy, same girl, but different name. It's like the same type of person over and over and over again keeps showing up in your life. That's something to look at. Why is that happening? So, and I think we are over. over time. Got the talking. So we'll just do a quick kind of grounded meditation thing. So get comfortable. If you're in a chair or lying down, just get yourself in a position, or you can just relax your body. Let's take 5 deep breaths in through your nose and then out through your mouth. With each breath in, sending that oxygen to each of the corners of your body, down into your arms, your legs. And as you exhale, exhaling any tension or pain that you might be holding on to. As you continue to breathe, now visualizing the light that you're breathing in, or the air that you're breathing in, as a restorative, brilliant white light. As you breathe in, imagine it just effortlessly flowing throughout your body, swirling and moving effortlessly and quickly in and around your body as it passes every single cell, restoring and regenerating. And as you exhale, perhaps visualize your breath as some sort of kind of gray color, exhaling any tension or anxiety that's coming out as some sort of shade of gray. Perhaps the darker the shade, the deeper the level of anxiety or tension. With each breath in, sending more and more of that restorative white light throughout your body. And as you exhale, releasing more and more of that tension and anxiety. Noticing that with each breath in, that your exhale breath starts becoming lighter and lighter. Continue your breathing. And bringing your attention to the top of your head, noticing if they're storing any type of tension, anxiety, pain. You kind of work your way down your face, down to your eyes, relaxing your eyes, noticing if you tend to kind of keep them tense, pinched, letting them relax, relaxing your cheeks, your jaw, your neck, letting your jaw fall open, and relaxing your tongue, removing it from the roof of your mouth. Continuing to breathe. Relaxing your shoulders, letting them drop down. Relaxing your chest. Letting your chest fall open as your shoulders drop down and back. Relaxing your arms. Continuing to breathe. Relaxing your hands. Relaxing your chest, your stomach, your hips. Allowing your legs to fall into whatever position is the most comfortable. Relaxing your thighs, your knees, your calves, and your feet. Feeling the heaviness of your body as you begin to fully relax. Bringing your attention now back to your breath. Let's do 4 more breaths. Breathing in with that white restorative light. And continuing to exhale any stress or anxiety that you're continuing to hold on to. Hopefully by now you've noticed that your exhale breath has become lighter and lighter, if not completely white. And spending the next 4 breaths to see if we can get that inhale with the white light to match the exhale with the white light. So bringing our attention to that now. Feeling that white light expand and move effortlessly throughout your body, kind of connecting you to everything that is good and right with the world and with yourself and within other people. Let's take a moment right now and kind of visualize sending out an energetic hug of support to people that you think might need it, whether they're in this chat tonight or people in your daily life. Connecting to everything that is good and right in the world. And when you're ready, come on back. Give yourself a really big, energetic hug, reminding yourself that you have come a long way and that you are doing so many things right. That there is so much that is right about you, When you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes. Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me here tonight. And I will see you next week. Angie and I have our live stream 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Tuesday. We alternate YouTube channels, but next week will be on mine. And then Wednesday will be here again, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we go for about 3 hours. So we will see you then. So you guys, thank you so much for everything. And lots of love to you. You are this way. You are not alone and you are not crazy and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care. Have a fantastic week. Good night.